Chapter 245. By the time Lin left the star web, the sky in the real world had already begun to brighten. Although a night of cold rain increased the chill of the late autumn morning. However, it cleansed the light of dawn and made it even more resplendent. Lin Yuan looked at the rising sun and stretched his body. He then carefully lay on the bed as he was afraid of waking up Genius and Chimey, who were sound asleep. Genius was originally sprawled on Lin Yuan's pillow, but in its dream, Genius and Chimey seemed to have instinctively sensed Lin Yuan's arrival and moved closer to him. This scene was exactly the same as what had happened in the small Fei store in the Xia region half a year ago. Lin Yuan closed his eyes and thought about everything that had happened in the past few months before settling down. This kind of accumulation was a complete analysis of one's gains and losses after a period of time. Not only did he solidify the path he had taken before, but he was also clear about the path he wanted to take in the future. When Lin Yuan woke up, it was already late in the morning. When Lin Yuan opened his eyes, he noticed that Genius and Chimey were looking at him with their big black eyes. Lin Yuan reached out to scratch Genius' chin and rub Chimey's little head. "Are you two little things hungry?" After saying that, he fed the platinum celery vines leaves and platinum cane loofahs fruits to Genius and Chimey. After washing up, Lin Yuan went downstairs and found Wenyu entertaining the Class 4 spirit craftsman Hu Quan in the living room. Lin Yuan hurriedly went downstairs and said to Hu Quan, "That's right. Senior Hu Quan, are you planning to close the shop and stay in my manor to work?" Hu Quan's eyes immediately lit up. "You're finally awake. You were unconscious yesterday and I waited for you for half a day. When I came to find you this morning, you slept until noon." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan scratched the back of his head. Lin Yuan had always been a very regular person in his life, but he had been busy these 2 days, constantly compressing his time. This was because he planned to go out and train as soon as he was done with his matters. Since Hu Quan wanted to stay in his mansion, it was definitely good news for Lin Yuan. When Hu Quan saw that Lin Yuan did not speak, he could not help but feel a little uncomfortable. Hu Quan had only wanted to stay in Lin Yuan's manor, but ever since he had returned, he had been scratching his heart. After seeing the red sandalwood longevity fish tank, he could see that Lin Yuan's foundation was extraordinary. To a Class 4 spirit craftsman, nothing was more attractive than those rare spiritual materials. Using rare spiritual materials to create something was a spirit craftsman's dream in itself. By working for Lin Yuan, he would have the opportunity to come into contact with those rare spiritual ingredients every day. Hu Quan was satisfied to be able to see the red sandalwood longevity fish tank every day. "Sorry to have kept you waiting. May I know what are the conditions for you to work in my manor?" Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Hu Quan heaved a sigh of relief. "In terms of conditions, if you can give me spirit materials equivalent to this completely jade-textured red sandalwood to create every month, I won't take your money. If you can't give me a spiritual material equivalent to this completely jade-textured red sandalwood every month to create, then I'll pay the market price of a Class 4 spirit craftsman." Hu Quan's words were very straightforward. Hu Quan's purpose in staying in Lin Yuan's manor was to have another chance to get a spiritual material like this completely jade-textured red sandalwood to create. If Lin Yuan could not meet Hu Quan's requirements, Hu Quan naturally would not work for him for nothing. The market price of a Class 4 spirit craftsman was not cheap. Upon hearing Hu Quan's words, Lin Yuan took out a very large piece of wood from his spirit lock spatial zone without saying a word. This wood showed a very beautiful reddish gold color, was glossy, had a unique texture and had a very fragrant wooden fragrance. When Hu Quan saw it, he immediately could not help but want to touch this golden red wood. This golden red wood was the completely jade-textured old pear wood. The old pear wood was a batch of wood that Lin Yuan had placed in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, the old pear wood that had been placed in the spirit lock spatial zone had undergone a complete jade-textured transformation. Lin Yuan had originally prepared this old pear wood to be used as a cushion on the huge table in his spirit lock spatial zone. When Lin Yuan had bought this old pear wood, he had bought 4 pieces of it. Lin Yuan had taken out one of the remaining 3 pieces that could not be used in the spirit lock spatial zone. Now that he had the Class 4 spirit craftsman, Hu Quan, Lin Yuan's completely jade-textured old pear wood could finally come in handy. "Senior, I have enough rare spiritual materials. It seems that you're going to work for me in the manor for free." Hu Quan was not young anymore. When he saw the completely jade-textured old pear wood that Lin Yuan had taken out, He was so happy that he almost lost half his life. At that moment he felt that he was the happiest spirit craftsman in the world. With so many precious spiritual materials for him to carve, Hu Quan suddenly felt that he might have a chance to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman in the future. If that was really the case, his ancestral grave would be considered to be emitting green smoke. Hu Quan's face smiled like a bitter chrysanthemum, making Wen Yu feel disgusted. She felt that if she added a little black bean spirit fish and put it on Hu Quan's face, it could be served as a cold dish on the table. What are you going to do with this completely jade-textured old pear wood? I think it would be good to carve the 1,000 tigers leaving the mountains or the 100 birds of the parasol tree. Upon seeing Hu Quan's eager appearance, Lin Yuan took out an inkstone and wrote 2 words on this completely jade-textured old pear wood. Far away, return. Under Hu Quan's dumbfounded expression, Lin Yuan spoke. Senior, help me carve the 2 words return from far away on this completely jade-textured old pear wood. This house doesn't have a plaque yet, but it can be hung up now. He had suddenly thought of the word return from far away when he had watched Lu Jie train today. This was Lin Yuan's kind of wish. Whether it was Lu Jie, Wen Yu, or Zhou Xian, who had yet to move into the house, no matter how far they went, they all hoped that they could return safely. At the same time, Lin Yuan also hoped that he could still be a young man after leaving for half his life. His original heart and sincerity were still the same. Hu Quan looked at the 2 words with a complicated expression. The words are not bad, but do you have to be so direct? I know you're the owner of this mansion, but you don't have to swear such a high-profile oath, right? In Hu Quan's opinion, the meaning of the word return from far away was that this land belonged to me, Hu Quan. Unlike Lu Jie and Wen Yu, Lin Yuan and Hu Quan had signed a very comprehensive employment agreement. On one hand, it was to give Hu Quan a guarantee, and on the other hand, it was also a protection for Lin Yuan's precious spiritual ingredients. From now on, Hu Quan, a Class 4 spirit craftsman, would become the return from faraway mansion's only toolman. Lin Yuan was ready to set off for training tomorrow. Before going out for training, Lin Yuan planned to complete the transaction with Gao Feng, whom he had previously agreed on. Just as he was about to call Gao Feng, Lin Yuan's cell phone rang. When Lin Yuan looked at the caller ID on his cell phone, his pupils constricted and his heart thumped rapidly. The person calling him was none other than Auntie Zhang, whom Lin Yuan had been thinking about all this time but had yet to hear from. Baidu, read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 246. During this period, Lin Yuan had been contacting Su Jin and Dong Hai to ask about Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li. Ever since Lin Yuan's Jasmine Lily had become a fantasy breed and obtained the exclusive skill Severed Life, Lin Yuan had always wanted to try and see if he could treat the tarsal gangrene on Uncle Li's leg. Similarly, Auntie Zhang's fantasy breed Fei, which usually disguised itself as a terror rabbit, had been in a critical state. Lin Yuan's Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill Life Imprint had accumulated a massive amount of vitality. As for Uncle Li's leg injury and Auntie Zhang's fantasy breed Fei's injuries, Lin Yuan was really confident in treating them. Even if the gangrene on Uncle Li's leg was poisonous, the Jasmine Lily's healing ability might not be able to completely remove it. However, there were other ways to treat Uncle Li's leg injury. The gangrene on Uncle Li's leg and the poison it carried had been firmly locked in his left leg. In fact, as long as Uncle Li's left leg was amputated and the Jasmine Lily's severed limb regrowth ability, it would be enough for Uncle Li to recover. However, no matter how Lin Yuan tried to contact Uncle Li and Auntie Zhang, there had been no news. Every time after contacting Su Jin and Dong Hai, Su Jin and Dong Hai's answers made Lin Yuan feel that they seemed to know something but were deliberately hiding it from him. This made Lin Yuan very worried about Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li's physical condition. But now, when Lin Yuan looked at Auntie Zhang's call, he suddenly felt a little sour in his nose. Lin Yuan's dreams were big, but his own world had always been very small. Having lived 2 lives, Lin Yuan could see many things clearly and open-mindedly. Like don't like. Hate don't hate. Agree don't agree. Close not close. Lin Yuan had always treated everything around him like this, upholding responsibility and love for life. In the past, Lin Yuan's world was so small that there were only Zhou Xian, Auntie Zhang and Uncle Wang. Even though Lin Yuan had slowly gotten to know many people since his body had recovered. Zhou Xian, Auntie Zhang, Uncle Li, the Moon Empress, Cold Moon, Mystic Moon, the mother of Bloodbath, Wuxia, and when you were the ones that Lin Yuan truly cared about. Even with Zhang Xiaobai, Xin Ying, Tan Ran and Lu Pinru, there were only a handful of them. Now that he had finally received Auntie Zhang's call, Lin Yuan's heart that had been hanging in suspense was finally at ease. At least he knew that Aunt Zhang, who was calling him, was fine. Lin Yuan picked up the phone and before he could speak he heard Auntie Zhang's forthright and passionate voice filled with deep concern. Little Yuan, I heard from Su Jin and Dong Hai that you followed Redbud City's city lord Ling Xiao to the imperial capital, and your body's problems have all healed? Lin Yuan listened to Auntie Zhang's familiar voice and tone, as well as the deep concern in her words. A faint smile appeared on Lin Yuan's face. Auntie Zhang, I am fine. My body has recovered and I am now a creation master. Lin Yuan had heard from Auntie Zhang that he had gone to the royal capital with Ling Xiao. He reckoned that she must have heard about it from Su Jin and Dong Hai. Auntie Zhang was like his elder, so he didn't have anything to hide from her. Therefore, even if Auntie Zhang did not ask, he had already said that he had become a creation master. Lin Yuan could feel Auntie Zhang's concern for him, so he said that he had become a creation master so that Auntie Zhang could be at ease and not worry about him. Little Yuan, it's good that your body has recovered. Auntie Zhang had always expressed all her emotions in her tone. At that moment, Auntie Zhang's tone was filled with indescribable joy, and the joy was almost transmitted over the phone. Lin Yuan's heart could not help but be moved. No matter what, Auntie Zhang was still most concerned about his body. Compared to his health, achievements were no longer important in Auntie Zhang's eyes. However, Lin Yuan still asked the question that he wanted to know the most. Auntie Zhang, how are you and Uncle Li's bodies? Has Uncle Li's leg been treated? Little Yuan, your Uncle Li's leg is already healed. Don't you know about my body? It has always been very good. When Lin Yuan heard Auntie Zhang's words, he knew that she was afraid that he would be worried and still did not tell him the truth. However, at least Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li's bodies were fine. They were much better than when they had left the Xia region. For a moment, Lin Yuan did not know how he should tell Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li that he wanted to help with their treatment. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard a very familiar laughing voice coming from Auntie Zhang's side of the phone. Ying, can you hurry up and talk to little Yuan? Can't you see that I'm waiting in line here? Immediately after, Lin Yuan heard a lot of noise coming from the phone. It was obvious that Uncle Li had snatched the phone from Auntie Zhang's hand. Little Yuan, tell me, what do you want to eat? Uncle Li will make it for you. Every time Lin Yuan heard Uncle Li ask him what he wanted to eat, he would at most ask him what he wanted to eat. Lin Yuan replied without thinking. I love all the meat that Uncle Li makes. Haha, I know that you love to eat meat. Do you think the 4 happiness meatballs are better made with pork or fish? Lin Yuan asked subconsciously. Of course pork is better. Lin Yuan could feel that after he said pork is better, Uncle Li was stunned for a few seconds and suddenly asked very seriously, Little Yuan, compared to pork, haven't you always loved to eat fish? Lin Yuan could feel that Uncle Li suddenly became serious and he was not quite used to it. When Lin Yuan interacted with Uncle Li normally, Uncle Li always had that cynical way of speaking and temperament. When Lin Yuan interacted with Uncle Li always had that frivolous way of speaking and temperament. However, since Uncle Li actually asked, Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and replied, I do. But I like to eat fried fish and squirrel fish. As for the 4 happiness meatballs, I feel that pork is better. I do prefer fish, but I like fried fish and squirrel fish. As for the 4 happiness meatballs, I think pork is more delicious, Wang Yao said. However, I like to eat fried fish and squirrel fish. As for the 4 happiness meatballs, I feel that pork is more delicious. Food doesn't have a fixed taste. What suits the palate is precious. Using the same ingredients in different dishes will produce different taste. That's why eating the same ingredients in 2 dishes will actually feel like 2 different things. What suits the palate is precious. The same ingredients used in different dishes will give off different taste. Therefore, the same ingredients in 2 dishes will be more like different things. Uncle Li, I'm now in the royal capital. Why don't you and Auntie Zhang come to the royal capital and stay here with me? Lin Yuan thought that after Uncle Li and Auntie Zhang came over, he would bring up the matter of treating Uncle Li and Auntie Zhang. There's no fixed delicacy in food. What suits the palate is treasured. Little Yuan, how good would it be if I had asked you which of the 4 happiness meatballs tastes better, fish or pork? Your Auntie Zhang and I will be busy with some matters for this year. After your Auntie Zhang and I are done with our work, Uncle Li will go to the capital to cook for you." After hanging up the phone, Lin Yuan could not help but touch the back of his head. Lin Yuan did not understand why Uncle Li was so happy. What had he figured out? Why was he going to be busy for a year? Lin Yuan did not think too much about it. However, Lin Yuan did not think too much about it. Now that he knew that Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li were fine, he was completely relieved. When Auntie Zhang saw the expression on Uncle Li's face, she suddenly froze. Then Auntie Zhang revealed a clear smile. "It's been almost 20 years. Have you figured it out?" Upon hearing that, Uncle Li looked at Auntie Zhang and said, "Yes. I've thought it through. Let's go back. I wonder if that old thing will beat me to death after I return." Auntie Zhang went up and patted Uncle Li's back fiercely and said, "What old thing? Don't talk about my father like that." Uncle Li smiled awkwardly and said, "If Master hits me, Ying, you have to help me stop him. Otherwise, Master won't be able to control his strength. If he beats me to death, you won't have a place to cry." Madame Zhang looked at Uncle Li and gave him a flying kick. "Li Zhonglin, I broke my father's heart when I ran away with you. I can't even protect myself when I get back, and you want me to plead for you." Hearing this, Uncle Li blinked his eyes awkwardly and squeezed out a sentence after a long time. "We really are a pair of ill-fated Mandarin ducks." Aunt Zhang suddenly smiled brightly. "You're the one who's not suffering. Anyway, I'll go back and tell my father that I was tricked by you when I first came out with you. Just wait for us father and daughter to beat you up." Uncle Li was dumbfounded when he heard Auntie Zhang's words. His expression was like a bullied bun. Aunt Zhang chuckled. "Based on my understanding of my father, he wouldn't dare to punish you again. If he did, he wouldn't be able to take it if you left for another 20 years. Aunt Zhang's words made Uncle Li even more embarrassed. Auntie Zhang snorted. "Little Yuan is now a creation master. When I go back, I will ask my father if he can take a look at little Yuan's talent and accept him as a disciple." Uncle Li widened his eyes. "But if there's a difference in seniority, then wouldn't that kid Yuan be my junior brother? I hope those who really like this book can come to QQ to support the original version. Baidu, read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free." Chapter 247. When you had been paying attention to Lin Yuan's expression when he had answered the phone just now. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan had hung up the phone, when you handed over a cup of freshly brewed spirit tea. "Young master, I feel like you're a lot happier after the call." Lin Yuan replied with a laugh. "Yes, I can finally put my worries to rest." Apart from increasing his strength, Lin Yuan had been thinking about Auntie Zhang and Uncle Wang the most. As for Zhou Xian, Cold Moon had already arrived in Redbud City, so he had nothing to worry about. During this period of time, he could feel how hard she had been studying and training during the phone call. Besides pride, Lin Yuan also felt a little sorry for her for working so hard to improve her strength. However, Lin Yuan blamed himself more, feeling that he seemed to have raised a good sister astray. Although he never paid attention to his own information on Star Web, he was very concerned about Zhou Xi's information. Not long ago, Zhou Xi had also started fighting in the Star Tower. Zhou Xi's terrifying talent and the bronze/fantasy obsidian iron wild bull naturally attracted most people's attention. Some Star Web columnists were even writing articles about Zhou Xi. Everything else was fine, but Zhou Xi actually had a very mighty and domineering title on Star Web. Iron Bull Knight. It wouldn't be a bad title for a man, but Zhou Xi was a girl. It was a little too much to give her such a title. Some time ago, when Zhou Xian had been on the phone with Lin Yuan, she had mentioned that she wanted to learn a hobby after school. Lin Yuan naturally raised both hands in approval. It was rather good to learn a hobby outside of school. However, when Lin Yuan found out that she wanted to learn boxing, he could not help but sigh. Lin Yuan felt as though he was about to split open. In the end, after Lin Yuan tried his best to persuade her, she finally changed her idea of learning boxing techniques to learning fencing. Lin Yuan just wanted to hold his forehead with his hand. "Did I raise my sister astray, or is she already so crooked that I can't pull her back?" If he was given another chance, he would never let her contract the obsidian iron wild bull again. However, he was more at ease with Zhou Xian learning the Baroque sword. Learning foil sword was much better than Zhang Xiaobai learning Yen Yi in every aspect. He could not help but sigh. Next year he could consider letting her contract a third Fae. Lin Yuan might have a direction for the third Fae, but he didn't have a clear choice. But now Lin Yuan would probably have to add a new standard to his choice. Apart from being powerful, the third Fae she chose to contract must also be good-looking. If the Obsidian Iron Wild Bull's savagery was worth 10,000 points, then Chu Xi's newly contracted third Fae would definitely pull it down to 0 points. Lin Yuan called Gao Feng. Lin Yuan's phone rang until it ended before Gao Feng picked it up. Lin Yuan could only hear that Gao Feng's voice was a little hoarse, as though he had just woken up and was in a daze. It was just that his tone wasn't very good. "Who is it? I'm sleeping. I'll call you when I wake up." Lin Yuan raised his brows. It seemed that Gao Feng still had the mood to wake up. "You don't want bronze/epic support type plant phase anymore?" As soon as Lin Yuan said that, he quickly put the phone 10 centimeters away from his ear. Lin Yuan heard Gao Feng yelling on the other end of the phone. "Brother, I've been waiting for your call." Lin Yuan felt that Gao Feng also had the talent of changing faces in Sichuan opera. "Previously you said that you wanted a support-type plant Fae with a stronger attack. I wonder if there are any specific choices?" Gao Feng was no longer sleepy on the other end of the phone. In fact, as soon as he heard Lin Yuan mention bronze/epic phase, Gao Feng had been completely awake. Especially after hearing Lin Yuan say that, Gao Feng's heart violently jumped, and his pupils contracted. As a core member of the Radiance Federation's 32 major cities, Wind Mist City's richest Gao family, Gao Feng's ability to listen and distinguish sounds was simply too strong. Lin Yuan's question was tantamount to saying that he could choose any support-type plant Fae with offensive power that he wanted. The meaning of the statement was self-evident. Only a person with at least a Class 4 Creation Master backing him would have the confidence to say such words. Even a Class 4 Creation Master would find it difficult to nurture a bronze/epic Fae. However, the words that came out of Lin Yuan's mouth were as simple as asking if he had eaten. Even with the wealth of the Wind Mist City's Gao family, they definitely did not have the confidence to say such words. All the cells in Gao Feng's body were telling Gao Feng that it was time to suck up to him. It was just that Gao Feng was a little embarrassed and stuttered. "Brother, can I change the support-type plant phase that focus on attack into support-type phase that focus on support-type phase? Those that can help people recover spiritual power." When Gao Feng spoke, he was very careful. He was obviously afraid that if he suddenly changed his mind, Lin Yuan would have a bad opinion of him. When trading for bronze/epic phase, it was not a good thing to suddenly change the type of bronze/epic phase after making an agreement. Lin Yuan was a little surprised. What had Gao Feng experienced during the past few days? What made a support that only focused on dealing damage become a support that only focused on supporting? The change was simply too great. Lin Yuan's Fae affinity was inclined toward healing and support-type phase that did not have any offensive means. However, Lin Yuan had always been inclined toward output when it came to enhancing his phase. However, when it came to output, Lin Yuan's control, defense and healing were all very comprehensive. He would not let himself have an obvious shortcoming. However, in just a few days, Gao Feng's thinking had changed faster than an old lady spraining her waist. However, Lin Yuan did not have any objections to Gao Feng's change of choice. He said, "Then among the support-type plant phase that have support-type abilities that can recover spiritual power, do you have any better choices?" Gao Feng's eyes lit up. Lin Yuan's words meant that there was a way. "Brother, do you have any bronze/epic spirit spring lilies?" When Lin Yuan heard the word spirit spring lily, he said, "A bronze/epic spirit spring lily is not cheap. A bronze/epic spirit spring lily isn't cheap. An ordinary bronze/normal spirit spring lily's price is already comparable to an ordinary gold Fae. Furthermore, the requirement for the spirit spring lily's quality advancement is extremely high. Even pinnacle class 4 creation masters will have a certain difficulty and might fail. Therefore you should understand the price." Gao Feng chuckled and said, "Don't worry, brother. Brother, don't worry. Gao Feng never lack money. However, brother, can I have 3 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies?" Lin Yuan smacked his lips when he heard that. "Young man, you're quite arrogant. 3 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies were much rarer than the 3 bronze/epic flame vein dragonflies that had awakened the Silurian overlord huge vein dragonfly bloodline that he had traded with the lightning sparrow king previously. Therefore, in terms of price, the standard was naturally higher. Lin Yuan's bottom line was at least 10 source-type items. Moreover, there must be 2 source-type items that were relatively easy to contract and were in high demand before Lin Yuan would choose to trade. When Gao Feng saw that Lin Yuan did not speak for a long time, he carefully probed. Can I trade with the island whale? Upon hearing the words island whale, Lin Yuan made a prompt decision. Sure. Lin Yuan had not expected that someone would be willing to trade the island whale, even if it was 3 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies. In a sense, the island whale's preciousness was not inferior to a bronze/legend fae that had yet to appear on the market. Baidu, read the latest chapter of the Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 248. The island whale's preciousness wasn't because of how powerful it was, but because of the strategic significance of faes like the island whale. Since the spirit chi awakening, the ocean had become a forbidden place for humans. Similarly, the sky above the ocean had become as dangerous as the deep sea. Many faes living in the ocean had the means to attack the sky above the ocean after reaching platinum. Some fish faes relied on spraying high-pressure water into the sky and even set off 100-meter-tall waves. There were also some marine faes that could temporarily jump from the ocean to the sky to launch attacks. This was also the reason why only a handful of human powerhouses were able to set foot in the ocean. The world's territory was huge and there were many federations. However, the ocean separated them and there were few opportunities to communicate. The island whale, a magical life form, had become a way for humans to set foot in the ocean, and it was absolutely safe at that time. The island whale was a very magical life form and couldn't be considered a life form in the ordinary sense. This was because the birth of the island whale didn't come from the island whale's mother's womb, but from a large whale fall in the depths of the ocean. The phenomenon of a whale sinking to the bottom of the ocean after its death was called a whale fall. A whale's carcass could support a set of seabed ecosystems for nearly 1,000 years. Only a place where thousands of magnificent cetacean beasts died together could be called a large whale fall. A whale fall was the world's magnificent beasts' last gentleness to the ocean. When a whale fell, all living things were born. When tens of thousands of whales fell, the island whale appeared. In the depths of the ocean, after a large whale fall, the whale's carcass would be completely decomposed by deep-sea life forms after nearly 10,000 years. A few gem-like eggs would be left behind in the deep sea after this huge whale had fallen. These eggs would nurture the island whale. It could be seen what a rare fae the island whale was and what an important strategic resource it was. Due to the praise of the miracle of life, the whale fall, all the life forms in the ocean wouldn't attack the island whale. The unborn island whale would sleep in the gem-like eggshell that appeared after the whale fall. After absorbing enough spirit chi, the island whale would automatically hatch. Before reaching the peak of diamond and becoming a fantasy breed, the island whale's body would only be over 10 meters long, which was not comparable to ordinary cetacean faes. However, when the island whale reached the peak of diamond and became a fantasy breed, it would become a suzerain. The island whale's body was so big that it looked like an island sheltered by the ocean on a turbulent sea. After reaching the suzerain tier, the stronger the island whale was, the larger its island would be. It could be said that the island whale was the only option for humans to venture into the ocean. A fae like the island whale could no longer be treated as a fae. This was because every suzerain island whale was a powerful foundation that could deter other large forces in the world. Lin Yuan did not expect that Gao Feng would actually choose to exchange an island whale for 3 epic spirit spring lilies. Although the value of 3 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies was roughly comparable to that of an island whale, it was not worth much. But in terms of significance, it was completely incomparable. This was because the 3 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies could be replaced by other bronze/epic faes. However, it was impossible to set foot in the sea without the island whale. Lin Yuan didn't know if he should say that he was lucky or that Gao Feng was really a prodigal. When Gao Feng heard that Lin Yuan agreed so quickly, he was delighted in his heart, but he quickly said, "It's not a big deal. Brother, although I'm trading with you for an island whale that has yet to develop intelligence in a gemstone eggshell, This island whale may be a little special. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan became solemn. How is it special? Gao Feng smiled bitterly and said, I don't know how special it is. I'll bring it over for you to take a look before you decide if you want to trade or not. If you don't trade for the island whale, I'll use source-type items or precious spiritual ingredients to trade with you. I definitely won't let you suffer a loss. When Gao Feng said this, he began to think about how many source-type items he should prepare to bring over first. Gao Feng also wanted to make 2 preparations. This island whale that had yet to hatch was too special. It was so special that the Gao family had no way to hatch it. The Gao family provided for a Class 4 Creation Master. However, this Class 4 Creation Master had just become a Class 4, so it was still very difficult for him to enhance a Bronze/Epic Fae. However, the Class 4 Creation Master still had the eyesight. With the Class 4 Creation Master's confirmation, this island whale that was still in the gemstone eggshell had mutated. However, the island whale was rare, and even the Class 4 Creation Master could only see that it had mutated. However, there was no research on what exactly had happened to the mutated island whale. This was also why Gao Feng was able to control this island whale. Otherwise, even if Gao Feng was the only direct descendant of Wind Mist City's Gao family, he definitely wouldn't be qualified to take out such a fae that symbolized the foundation to trade. Lin Yuan didn't care much. When Gao Feng took out this island whale, he would use true data to see where it had mutated and whether he was worth the trade. Lin Yuan and Gao Feng had agreed to meet at 3 p.m., so there were still a few hours. At this time, Lin Yuan had already started to purchase spirit spring lilies from the Star Web's rare lifeform pavilion and began to enhance them. In the inner palace of the Leaning Moon Mountain's Radiant Moon Palace, Xianyu looked at the proud but somewhat worried Moon Empress and couldn't help but say, Moon Empress, young lord didn't look for you to write the recommendation letter. Instead, he used the Celestial Stairway title that he obtained from the Celestial Stairway to obtain the qualification to compete for the Radiance 100 sequence. You should be happy. The Moon Empress looked at Mystic Moon with melancholy and said, This consort's disciple is naturally outstanding, but this consort's disciple is too independent. This makes me, as his master, feel like I haven't been of any help in his path of growth. Xianyu wanted to say something, but she didn't say it out loud. Instead, she kept it in her heart. A true prodigy was never a flower in a greenhouse, but a hero who faced difficulties head-on and opened up a path of his own with his own strength. If Lin Yuan sought the Moon Empress help for everything, it would prove that the Moon Empress had made a mistake when choosing her disciple. The Moon Empress felt that the spirit tea in her mouth wasn't fragrant no matter how she tasted it. She couldn't help but recall what Chef Supreme had said when she was talking about disciples with him. I'm so envious that you have such a good disciple. You can be so worry-free. At the thought of this, the Moon Empress was so angry that she stood up and asked Mystic Moon. Chef Supreme said that he's envious of this Empress's ease. He said that Chef Supreme envies me for being so relaxed. Is he mocking me for not being a good master? Xianyu broke out in a cold sweat and said carefully, Chef Supreme probably doesn't mean that. Xianyu really couldn't help but want to curse in her heart. Chef Supreme must really be envious of the Moon Empress. Chef Supreme was a Class 5 Creation Master with a lifetime of fame, but his 3 disciples were really worry-free. Chef Supreme was a Class 5 Creation Master with an illustrious reputation, but each of his 3 disciples was truly worrisome. It was said that the eldest disciple wasn't good at combat, but he was very talented as a Creation Master. However, his path was in conflict with the Creation Master's path that Chef Supreme had taught him. In the end, the eldest disciple insisted on his own path and left Chef Supreme to prove that the path he took was right. He even abducted Chef Supreme's only biological daughter. The second disciple was also an oddball. When he was a Creation Master, it was unknown what was wrong with his brain. He immediately went into the sea to do business and set up the Spirit Food Pavilion. Chef Supreme's second disciple was really good at doing business. He used his master's name to open a restaurant. It made the entire Radiance Federation think that the Spirit Food Pavilion was opened by Chef Supreme himself. The third disciple was Chef Supreme's disciple in recent years. He was very outstanding as a Creation Master and Spirit Chi professional, but he always liked to go to all kinds of dangerous places. It was said that Chef Supreme would go to dangerous places every 2 or 3 days because of his youngest disciple, and he was so scared that he had palpitations. Chef Supreme arranged a path protector for his youngest disciple, but the path protector was so tortured by his youngest disciple that he had a nervous breakdown. Chef Supreme was already so miserable in teaching his disciples, so how could he still have the mood to mock others? Wasn't this the same as comparing who was sweeter between potatoes and sweet potatoes? At that moment Xianyu heard the Moon Empress snort. No, Chef Supreme must be mocking this Empress. The next time this Empress sees him I will not let him off. Xianyu didn't dare to reply and just silently mourned for Chef Supreme for 3 seconds. Xianyu wasn't sure if Chef Supreme was mocking. However, when the Moon Empress went to settle the score with Chef Supreme, every word she said about her disciple was heard by Chef Supreme. That was definitely the best way to show off. Baiduan read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 249. Lin Yuan had already made plans to go out for training early in the morning. Therefore he had just set a time for 3 p.m. After completing the transaction with Gao Feng, Lin Yuan still had to go to the Radiant Moon Palace to meet his master, the Moon Empress, for a final question and answer session before going out for training. There were less than 4 hours left before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Therefore Lin Yuan immediately logged into Star Web and went to the Rare Lifeform Pavilion to purchase the Spirit Spring Lily that Wang Duo had chosen. The Spirit Spring Lily was a support-type plant fey. Although the Spirit Spring Lily was relatively rare and expensive, it was not too difficult to buy in the Rare Lifeform Pavilion. That was because the Spirit Spring Lily was a pure support-type fey, and its demand in the market was not very high. The Spirit Spring Lily did not have the slightest offensive ability or the slightest control ability. Instead, it was a support-type plant fey that could inject a large amount of spirit chi into other feys to increase the strength of their abilities. When the high-grade Spirit Spring Lily was activated, the spirit chi that gushed out of the lily bud was like a gushing spirit spring. Although the Spirit Spring Lily's support-type ability was extremely strong, the spirit chi professionals who contracted it were relatively awkward. This was because the spirit chi professionals who contracted the Spirit Spring Lily could only rely on their teammates no matter what they did in the future. If it was like Poison Beauty, whose contracted fey was extremely suitable for Star Tower duels and not suitable for spirit chi professional teams, then the spirit chi professionals who contracted the Spirit Spring Lily would only be suitable for team battles and not for Star Tower duels. However, support-type spirit chi professionals who contracted the Spirit Spring Lily could actually play a role comparable to healing-type spirit chi professionals in a team. In fact, the role of a support-type spirit chi professional like the Spirit Spring Lily was stronger than that of a healing-type spirit chi professional to some teams. However, the prerequisite for such a willful choice of a fey like the Spirit Spring Lily was that one had to have a stable and reliable team of spirit chi professionals. Lin Yuan did not understand why Gao Feng had contracted a breeze hibiscus. The breeze hibiscus was a support-type plant fey that had the ability to gather spirit chi. These 3 Spirit Spring Lilies were obviously in line with Gao Feng's fey affinity direction. Obviously, these 3 Spirit Spring Lilies were the feys that Gao Feng wanted to contract. Lin Yuan couldn't help but reveal a handsome and confused expression. Was Gao Feng trying to turn himself into a spirit chi silo on the battlefield? The higher the grade of a fey like the Spirit Spring Lily, the more obvious the role it could play in a team. This meant that the Spirit Spring Lily was a fey with extremely high requirements for resources. As the wealthiest family in Wind Mist City, Gao Feng naturally had the ability to support 3 Spirit Spring Lilies. However, such a fey combination was a little too extreme. Lin Yuan was the kind of person who did not like to put his fate in the hands of others. However, Gao Feng's choice of a contracted fey was the same as handing his fate to his teammates. The 3 Spirit Spring Lilies that Lin Yuan had purchased in the Star Web Rare Lifeform Pavilion were quickly delivered to him through Ostrich Logistics. When Lin Yuan had been enhancing these 3 Spirit Spring Lilies, an accident had occurred. This was because one of the Spirit Spring Lilies had mutated when it was promoted to the bronze rank. From the Spirit Spring Lily to the Yellow Spring Lily. This surprised Lin Yuan because the probability of a Spirit Spring Lily mutating into a Yellow Spring Lily was simply too low. Although it was not like the Blue Flash Butterfly mutating into the Blue Flash Purple Butterfly that only existed in legends, the probability was not much different from winning 5 million in the lottery. If this yellow spring lily did not consume too much spiritual energy to form a contract, Lin Yuan would have wanted to keep this yellow spring lily and form a contract with it. However, there was only a trace of spiritual energy left in Lin Yuan's mind, and he could only form a contract with a normal fae. Even if Lin Yuan increased some spiritual energy by eating the cinnabar Osmanthus haworthia in the future, he would rather form a contract with a few more normal fays. With that increased spiritual energy, Lin Yuan would rather form a contract with a few more normal fays and nurture them slowly. He was also unwilling to form a contract with a bronze yellow spring lily and completely consume his spiritual energy. Lin Yuan used Morbius' exclusive skill, Spirit Lock, because the Spirit Gather Goldfish and the Blue Flash Purple Butterfly were still stuck at Bronze X/Legend and lacked a suitable willpower rune to promote to Fantasy Breed. Therefore, Morbius had been unable to promote to Silver due to the Spirit Gather Goldfish and Blue Flash Purple Butterfly's grades. As a result, Morbius' Spirit Lock Spatial Zone had been unable to open the 4th Spirit Lock position. However, even if Morbius reached Silver and opened the 4th position of Spirit Lock, Lin Yuan would not let Morbius Spirit Lock the Yellow Spring Lily. This was because the Yellow Spring Lily's ability was not suitable for Morbius' exclusive skill, Spirit Lock. The Yellow Spring Lily's ability was to use the sacrificial sacrifice effect once in battle, sacrificing itself. It would sacrifice itself to heal the phase injuries and restore it to its peak state. After using sacrificial sacrifice, the Yellow Spring Lily would enter a withered state and need a long time to slowly recover. The phase grade that the Yellow Spring Lily could recover had to be lower than its own grade. Therefore, Morbius' exclusive skill, Spirit Lock, had an intrinsic conflict with the Yellow Spring Lily's sacrificial sacrifice. Moreover, the talents of the people around Lin Yuan were not suitable for forming a contract with this Yellow Spring Lily. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to ask Gao Feng for his opinion on this Yellow Spring Lily. Gao Feng should want to form a contract with this Yellow Spring Lily. The support effect that a Yellow Spring Lily could play could directly increase a support-type Spirit Chi professional strategic position in a team battle and even raise it above the main output members. This was because the Yellow Spring Lily's ability effect could greatly increase the fault tolerance in a team battle. Many 5-man teams would often revolve around 1 or 2 main phase in a team battle. The Spirit Spring Lily's effect was equivalent to letting the main phase in this team not die. No matter how serious the injuries they suffered, they could instantly recover to their peak state. A Bronze/Epic Yellow Spring Lily's value was many times higher than a Bronze/Epic Spirit Spring Lily. Therefore, during the transaction, Lin Yuan naturally could not calculate the price of the Bronze/Epic Yellow Spring Lily according to the previously agreed price of a Bronze/Epic Spirit Spring Lily. However, Gao Feng and the Wind Mist City's Gao family behind him should be willing and able to afford the price of this Bronze/Epic Yellow Spring Lily. At the same time, Lin Yuan was also very much looking forward to the abnormal island whale that Gao Feng would bring in a while. If a fae like the island whale was abnormal, there was only one possibility: it had mutated. Lin Yuan could not help but look forward to how the mutated island whale that Gao Feng had mentioned on the phone was different from a normal island whale. Gao Feng was willing to use a strategic class resource like the island whale as a bargaining chip to exchange with him. Given the foundation of a wealthy family like the Gao family, they would never easily take out important strategic resources. Therefore, this mutated island whale must be very problematic. It was so problematic that the Gao family felt that this island whale was a useless thing in Lin Yuan's hands. Not long after Lin Yuan finished enhancing the 3 Spirit Spring Lilies and obtained 2 Bronze/Epic Spirit Spring Lilies and 1 Bronze/Epic Yellow Spring Lily, Lin Yuan's cell phone rang. Lin Yuan took a look and saw that it was Gao Feng who was calling. Brother, hee. I've already told me the location. It's a manor. Brother, you have good taste. I saw that the environment of the manor you live in is not bad. Lin Yuan replied, Wait for me at the door. I'll get someone to bring you in. After saying that, Lin Yuan went downstairs and asked Wen Yu to bring Gao Feng over. In Lin Yuan's opinion, his transaction with Gao Feng was a process of enriching his resources. Through the transaction with Gao Feng, Lin Yuan could obtain those precious spiritual ingredients or phase that were not sold in the Star Web's rare lifeform pavilion. Soon, Gao Feng was brought to the entrance of the mansion by Wen Yu. At that moment, the completely jade-textured old pair wood plaque with the words "Return from Far Away" was hung under the eaves of the mansion. Under the sunlight, the completely jade-textured old pair wood plaque emitted a golden-red luster. The luster seemed to have that simple and unadorned wood texture. The moment Gao Feng entered the manor, he had already felt the difference in the manor. It was late autumn, and even some high-grade phase would have corresponding changes due to the change in the solar terms. For example, some plant type and wood type phase would lose their leaves in late autumn, while plant type and flower type phase would not bloom in winter and would be dormant. However, all the plants in this mansion seemed to be unaffected by the solar terms and were still so lush and green. The temperature inside the mansion was the same as outside. However, the state of the plant's growth was like midsummer. Gao Feng arrived at the entrance of the mansion. Although he had yet to step into the house, he could feel a large amount of spirit qi and a faint jade-like luster. Gao Feng's heart jumped. Putting aside the large amount of spirit qi, just this jade-like luster was not a stranger to Gao Feng. Baidu was the first to read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 250. This kind of jade-textured luster was very clear and seemed to have a natural refreshing feeling. Gao Feng, who came from an aristocratic family, could not be more familiar with this feeling. This was because the flower carving on Gao Feng's bed was carved from jade-textured willow wood. However, Gao Feng had yet to enter the mansion and he could feel this halo during the day. Gao Feng knew that there was only one possibility. This mansion had a large number of things made of completely jade-textured wood. The moment he stepped into the mansion, Gao Feng suddenly felt that he was not as confident as when he came. As the richest family in Wind Mist City, the Gao family's wealth could be ranked in the entire Radiance Federation. As the only direct descendant of the Gao family, Gao Feng's arrogance and vision were unimaginable to ordinary people. It could even be said that Gao Feng was very flattering to Lin Yuan because Lin Yuan had the bronze/epic phase that he needed. Gao Feng would take out the mutated island whale, which was useless to the Gao family, to trade with Lin Yuan. He wanted to show off the Gao family's strength and wealth and let Lin Yuan know the benefits of trading with the Gao family. However, looking at the furnishings in this mansion, Gao Feng suddenly did not know where to put his arrogance as a descendant of the Gao family. Gao Feng naturally recognized the glow-winged butterflies, spirit-containing hibiscuses and 5 fortune ranches. In Gao Feng's eyes, such a large number of bronze/flawless 5 fortune ranches, glow-winged butterflies, and spirit-containing hibiscuses had been converted into radiance dollars. Furthermore, with such a large number of bronze/flawless phase, there might be a few that had the potential to evolve to bronze/epic. It was simply too extravagant and shocking for such a fae to be casually raised in the residence. Although Gao Feng could not name the 3 carps that looked like dragons and phoenixes, he still had the vision to look at things. These 3 bronze/epic high-class auspicious fays were worth dozens of ordinary bronze/epic fays. Coupled with the completely jade-textured furniture and the fish tank made of completely jade-textured red sandalwood, Gao Feng clearly realized how deep the foundation of this mansion's owner was. It wasn't that the Gao family didn't have completely jade-textured wood, but most of them were made into ornaments and sculptures. It was inevitable that the furniture would be damaged if it was knocked around. Even to Gao Feng, the act of casually using furniture made from completely jade-textured wood could be considered a squandering act. The main residence of the Gao family was by a mountain and a river. Even the decorations in the main residence, which had been around for thousands of years, were not as luxurious as the decorations and furnishings in this residence. Gao Feng had completely retracted his arrogance from this transaction. If Gao Feng had only treated Lin Yuan as a superficial brother previously, he now really wanted to be friends with Lin Yuan. Gao Feng was very quick-witted. There was no harm in currying favor with this young man in front of him. Moreover, as a descendant of a wealthy family, Gao Feng had a good understanding of the strength and status of the people in his circle of friends. In Gao Feng's opinion, only people with similar strength and background could become friends who could share resources with each other. Because the strong could unite and become stronger. The combination of the strong and the weak for the strong would either absorb the weak as a vassal or be a burden. When you said, "Young master, I've brought Gao Feng over," I'll help Uncle Hu to see if there are any other things in the manor that need to be meticulously sculpted and designed. Lin Yuan nodded and Wen Yu bowed and left the residence. This made Gao Feng even more shocked. Gao Feng could feel the arrogance hidden deep in her bones from Wen Yu's bearing and bearing. This kind of arrogance was the kind of arrogance that was very polite. This kind of arrogance with politeness could only be nurtured in a true faction. Gao Feng had always thought that Wen Yu was also the owner of this mansion, but he now knew that this young lady in front of him was just a servant of this young man. Lin Yuan didn't care about what Gao Feng was thinking at this moment and said, "Come, let's sit down and talk. Let's sit down and talk." Then Lin Yuan poured a cup of spirit tea that had just been brewed on the table for Gao Feng. Gao Feng took a sip of the spirit tea and carefully savored it. He could tell that this spirit tea should be produced from a platinum tea tree. However, he didn't know what kind of platinum tea tree it was as he had never drunk it before. This spirit tea had a trace of spiritual fragrance, and when it rolled down the throat, it would immediately have a sweet aftertaste and bring along a light sweetness. The moment the spirit tea entered the mouth and was drunk, it was as though he had a light dream and was exceptionally strange. Gao Feng saw the crane silhouette censer on the table and couldn't help but ask, "Can I see what kind of incense is burning in this crane silhouette censer?" Lin Yuan picked up the teacup and took a sip of the spirit tea. "You're welcome, please go ahead." Since he had already seen Lin Yuan's foundation, Gao Feng didn't find it strange that the crane silhouette censer was completely carved from the jade-textured dragon blood gold silk bamboo. It was just that the incense in the censer was too heavy, and Gao Feng felt that his state of mind had completely calmed down when he smelled this scent. However, when Gao Feng opened the lid that was carved with the crane silhouette and glanced at the black crystal powder that was burning in the censer that was emitting green smoke, Gao Feng hurriedly put the lid back on the crane silhouette incense burner. Gao Feng felt as though he was about to split open. Gao Feng immediately recognized this black crystal powder as the completely jade-textured agarwood. A trace of such an item could be sold for hundreds of thousands of radiance dollars, and it was considered an elegant item. But now someone had actually shattered it and burned it in the censer. He simply did not take the radiance dollar seriously. Hundreds of thousands of radiance dollars had been burned in just a few minutes. Could it be just to smell this agarwood's faint and imperceptible calming fragrance? When Lin Yuan saw Gao Feng staring at the crane silhouette censer in a daze, he took the initiative to take out a bronze/epic spirit spring lily and placed it on the table. "This is a bronze/epic spirit spring lily. I wonder what's the situation with the abnormal island whale that has yet to hatch in the eggshell?" When Gao Feng saw the light pink bronze/epic spirit spring lily's 3 blooming flower buds and the spirit chi flowing like a mountain spring, he was delighted. Then, Gao Feng waved his hand and summoned an oval crystalline eggshell that was nearly half a meter tall from the flower-shaped diamond face storage box hanging on his wrist. The eggshells of ordinary island whales were dark blue with some brown lines. However, when Lin Yuan looked at this abnormal island whale egg in front of Gao Feng, he saw that this abnormal island whale egg had an extremely light blue color. The blue color had all sorts of indistinct bluish-white patterns. Lin Yuan could not help but say, "Your island whale's eggshell color is much worse than the island whales I know." Lin Yuan's words made Gao Feng a little embarrassed. After seeing Lin Yuan's foundation, Gao Feng had made up his mind to make friends with Lin Yuan, so he went straight to the point. "Brother, you should know about the breeding of island whales. If an island whale wants to hatch from its eggshell, it needs to devour a lot of spirit chi and water elements. Isn't there a saying that a whale swallows the world? Therefore, the amount of resources needed to breed a fantasy breed island whale is even more than the cost of feeding 100 king-tier powerhouses." Baidu read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 251. Gao Feng saw that Lin Yuan was listening to him seriously, so he continued. "This mutated island whale always has a sense of rejection toward absorbing spirit chi and water elements. Every time a creation master concocts a medicinal liquid rich in spirit chi and water elements, this mutated island whale can only absorb a little. To tell you the truth, with our Gao family's wealth, it is impossible to hatch this island whale." Lin Yuan was already using true data to observe this mutated island whale that was still in the crystal eggshell and had yet to hatch. However, under true data, this mutated island whale in the crystal eggshell was no longer called an island whale. It was called the floating island whale. Fey name: floating island whale, Fey species, baleen whale/winged whale, Fey grade. Unhatched. Fey type: Chi/water Fey quality. Normal. This floating island whale was not just a water type Fey but a water and Chi dual type Fey. Looking at the information under true data, this floating island whale really surprised Lin Yuan. When ordinary island whales evolved into fantasy breeds, they would form islands of varying sizes in the sea according to their strength. On the back of the island whale, the island whale's contractor could carry out construction as he wished. The island whale itself was a Fey born in a whale fall praise in the sea and would not be attacked by any marine Feys. In fact, many marine Feys would even spontaneously protect the island whale when it was attacked from outside. The island whale itself did not have any special attack means, but this did not mean that it was weak. On the contrary, few life forms of the same grade could resist the island whale's impact. Moreover, the island whale was like a moving fortress, and the real attack means often existed on its back. The difference between this floating island whale and normal island whales was that normal island whales could only form an island on their back in the sea. However, the floating island whale had two choices. It could either become an island in the sea or fly to the sky and build a floating city on its back. Gao Feng's words had also entered Lin Yuan's ears. He stroked the crystal eggshell that was incubating the floating island whale and tried to inject spiritual power into it. He found that the crystal eggshell would also reject the high-concentration spirit qi that he was transmitting over. With true data, Lin Yuan understood the reason. Previously, when the Gao family had been cultivating the floating island whale that had yet to hatch in the egg, they had not grasped the basic points. If one wanted to hatch an island whale, one could not just rely on a large amount of spiritual energy. At the same time, spiritual materials that contained a large amount of water elements were needed to promote the normal hatching of the island whale. It was the same for the floating island whale. It was supplemented with a large amount of spirit energy and water spirit materials, as well as gas spirit materials that were comparable to water spirit materials. Only then would the crystal eggshell that nurtured the floating island whale not reject it and absorb it. As for the floating island whale's contract method, it was very special and didn't require spiritual energy like other Feys. Instead, he needed to use his blood to imprint his scent on the floating island whale's eggshell for a long time. The floating island whale absorbed the blood on the eggshell. After birth, it would recognize the person with the smell of blood as its mother. At the same time, the floating island whale would take the initiative to form a contract with the person it treated as its mother. It could be said that the floating island whale's contract method was very simple. However, hatching an island whale wasn't something that ordinary people or forces could do. Gao Feng watched as Lin Yuan stroked the crystal eggshell that nurtured the mutated island whale and checked the island whale's situation. "Brother, if you don't think this island whale is good enough, I also brought a lot of source-type items to exchange." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan raised his brows. It would be fine if he didn't see this floating island whale, but how could he choose to let it go after seeing it? "I'll trade this island whale, but it may not be enough to trade for my 3 bronze/epic phase." Gao Feng blinked his eyes and thought, Lin Yuan isn't asking for too much, right? He wants to bargain with this mutated island whale that hasn't hatched yet. If that was the case, Gao Feng would rather keep this mutated island whale and trade it with source-type items. In the entire Radiance Federation, probably no family or faction could take out this unhatched island whale. The Gao family had obtained this island whale by chance. Due to the Gao family's experts going out to sea, they encountered a huge storm and tsunami. The ships made of gold spiritual materials were swept far away by the ocean currents, and the Gao family's experts could only sink into the deep sea to avoid the wind and waves that could tear steel apart. Just as they were avoiding the wind and waves in the deep sea, the Gao family's experts happened to find a large whale fall at the bottom of the sea that had almost ended. The Gao family's experts searched the location of this large whale fall and only found 2 crystal eggshells that had yet to hatch and were pregnant with the island whale. However, when the Gao family's experts picked up these 2 crystal eggshells that were pregnant with the island whale, they were frantically besieged by the marine Feys. At the cost of the death of 7 of the Gao family's king-class experts, they brought back a crystal eggshell that was pregnant with the island whale. The other island whale, which was still in the eggshell and had yet to hatch, had been snatched away by the marine phase in the battle with them. If it wasn't for the Gao family's king-level expert using a crystal eggshell with an island whale as bait, they wouldn't have been able to escape. Even if 7 king-class experts had perished in the other crystal eggshell that was pregnant with the island whale, it would not have been able to escape the pursuit of the crazy marine phase. It was just that the Gao family had paid such a huge price to bring back the island whale was a mutated one. For so many years the Gao family had racked their brains, but there was no way to make this mutated eggshell that was pregnant with the island whale no longer reject spirit qi and water elements. When Lin Yuan summoned the other 2 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies, Gao Feng stared at them without blinking. Gao Feng stared unblinkingly at the bright yellow bronze/epic spirit spring lily. He immediately recognized that it was a yellow spring lily. As a direct descendant of the Gao family, Gao Feng dared to want to buy 3 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies. However, he had never dared to think about finding a bronze/epic yellow spring lily. This was because Gao Feng had been trying to get a yellow spring lily for almost a year. However, Gao Feng had not even been able to obtain a bronze/normal yellow spring lily. Now that he saw this bronze/epic yellow spring lily, Gao Feng could not help but tremble with excitement. If Lin Yuan wanted to obtain the floating island whale, then Gao Feng wanted to obtain the yellow spring lily at least 10 times more than Lin Yuan. Gao Feng had not been satisfied with his talent since he was young. However, talent could not be changed no matter what, so Gao Feng had accepted his fate. Since he was young, Gao Feng had thought that since his talent was a mediocre support-type spirit qi professional, he might as well unleash the support-type spirit qi professional's support ability to the extreme. However, when Gao Feng was studying in Wind Mist City's Advanced Spirit Qi Academy, he suddenly understood that as a support-type spirit qi professional, no matter how strong his support ability was, he still had to rely on his teammates. Gao Feng deeply felt how helpless his fate was in the hands of others. That was why Gao Feng wanted to increase his attack power. This was also why Gao Feng wanted to obtain the source-type Hurricane Owlet Moth at the private auction. However, the overwhelming news of the tournament's start made Gao Feng's original thoughts return to the original place. Gao Feng's current thinking was also very carefree. After all, he was the only direct descendant of the Gao family. He had plenty of capital to squander. In Gao Feng's opinion, if he insisted on being a support that focused on output, his attack power would never be comparable to an offense-class spirit qi professional. That way he would really become a mediocre person. During this period of time, Gao Feng had been looking for a team that he could rely on. He could also display what a true support should be like in his heart. Now, as a stubborn perfectionist, Gao Feng finally saw the yellow spring lily he had been dreaming of. Moreover, the yellow spring lily was bronze/epic. Gao Feng looked at the bronze/epic yellow spring lily and said firmly to Lin Yuan, "Brother, this mutated island whale is indeed not worthy of these 2 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies and bronze/epic yellow spring lilies." Gao Feng paused for a moment, then said very sincerely, "Brother, name a price. How many source-type items can be exchanged for these 2 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies and this bronze/epic yellow spring lily?" Lin Yuan smiled and shook his head. Lin Yuan's shake of his head immediately made Gao Feng nervous. When Lin Yuan saw the floating island whale in the crystal eggshell that had yet to hatch, he had already made up his mind about what resources he was going to exchange with Gao Feng. Since the Gao family had tried their best to hatch this floating island whale, they would definitely have what Lin Yuan wanted. Moreover, these items used to hatch the island whale could not possibly appear in the Star Web's Rare Lifeform Pavilion. The reason was very simple. It was because the Star Web's Rare Lifeform Pavilion was not worthy of such items. Lin Yuan looked into Gao Feng's eyes and said indifferently, "Baidu, read the latest chapter of the Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free." Chapter 252. Lin Yuan's voice echoed unhurriedly. "Since you said that your Gao family cultivated this mutated island whale, then your Gao family must have elemental shellfish." As soon as Lin Yuan's words fell, Gao Feng's originally nervous expression immediately became exceptionally grave. Gao Feng was currently weighing the value of the elemental shellfish and the bronze/epic yellow spring lily. Even if the yellow spring lily was a support-type fae that Gao Feng dreamed of, he did not know if he should agree to Lin Yuan's conditions. Gao Feng knew that since Lin Yuan had proposed to trade the elemental shellfish, it meant that Lin Yuan had already made up his mind. If he didn't agree to exchange it with the elemental shellfish, it was very likely that this bronze/epic yellow spring lily would not be fated with him. However, even as the only direct descendant of the Gao family, Gao Feng couldn't make a decision on his own regarding the elemental shellfish. Gao Feng thought for a moment and said in a roundabout way, "Brother, do you want this elemental shellfish to cultivate your own island whale? The resources needed to cultivate the island whale and elemental shellfish are not a small amount." Lin Yuan didn't hide it and nodded. "Since I chose to trade this mutated island whale, I naturally have to nurture it." Gao Feng's eyelids twitched as he looked at the crystal eggshell containing the mutated island whale. Gao Feng was well aware of how much resources the Gao family had used up for this mutated island whale. It was simply a bottomless pit. The Gao family had been nurturing this mutated island whale for so long without any progress. Gao Feng did not think that Lin Yuan could hatch this mutated island whale. However, when he saw Lin Yuan's confident expression, he didn't know how to persuade him. When Lin Yuan really looked for a creation master to try to use the concocted spirit fluid to nurture this mutated island whale, he would probably back off. As for the elemental shellfish, Gao Feng hesitantly extended 4 fingers and said, "If you want to exchange for an elemental shellfish, I can't even take out a single adult elemental shellfish. I can only take out 4 young elemental shellfish that are dormant." Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and shook his head. 4 dormant infant elemental shellfish. Brother Gao is too stingy. This is a bronze/epic yellow spring lily. If Brother Gao misses it, you won't be able to find it anywhere else. He had heard that the elemental pearls produced by the elemental shellfish were required to nurture the island whale. This was the knowledge he had learned from the Moon Empress during the question and answer session with her. Lin Yuan had been curious and noted it down. He did not expect to be able to obtain a mutated floating island whale today. Lin Yuan knew that if he could exchange for 4 young dormant elemental shellfish, it would already be very suitable for him. However, since he was trading such a precious item with Gao Feng, he still had to raise the price. When Gao Feng heard Lin Yuan's words, he said very seriously, "Yes. Brother, if it weren't for the fact that you took out this bronze/epic yellow spring lily, which made it hard for me to reject, I would never have agreed to exchange it with the elemental shellfish. Our Gao family has been expanding into the sea all these years. We've sacrificed a lot of king-class combat power, but after so many years, we have less than 15 elemental shellfish. These 4 young elemental shellfish are the only 4 that the Gao family has left. Brother Lin, if you really feel that 4 young elemental shellfish are not enough, then I'll add another 5 million radiance dollars. Is that possible?" Gao Feng's words made Lin Yuan involuntarily recall the private auction held by the Lightning Sparrow King's king-class expert squad. Gao Feng had said the same thing in order to exchange for that source-type life form, the hurricane owlet moth. It was obvious that Gao Feng liked the yellow spring lily very much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such an aggrieved expression and added another 5 million radiance dollars to see if he could reach a deal with Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan knew about the elemental shellfish, and they were indeed abnormally precious. They only grew in places with high spirit chi concentration in the deep sea. However, places with high spirit chi concentration in the deep sea were inhabited by a large number of powerful marine faes. The elemental shellfish was a fae that had an extremely high requirement for spirit chi concentration. This was a little similar to Lu Jie's source-type life form, the insect queen. However, Lu Jie's source-type life form, the insect queen, could only recover its injured roots and evolve and improve its quality under high spirit chi concentration. As for the elemental shellfish, if they didn't live in an environment with high purity of spiritual energy, they would die in a short while. Therefore, for the other factions to allow the elemental shellfish to live healthily, they would need at least a Class 3 creation master to carefully accompany them. They used all kinds of precious spiritual ingredients to concoct a spiritual liquid that produced a high concentration of spiritual energy, just so that the elemental shellfish could survive. Nurturing the elemental shellfish was a matter that consumed a lot of resources. For the elemental shellfish that were in a dormant state during their infancy, as long as they didn't awaken the elemental shellfish with a high concentration of spirit energy, the elemental shellfish would be fine. In that case, the young elemental shellfish could survive for a long time in a dormant state. Gao Fengtian's decision to take out 4 infant elemental shellfish at once was already a rather bold decision. Lin Yuan said straightforwardly, "Why don't I become friends with Brother Gao?" 2 epic spirit spring lilies and a bronze/epic yellow spring lily in exchange for Brother Gao's unhatched mutated island whale, plus 4 elemental shellfish that are in a dormant state in their infancy. After speaking, Lin Yuan waved his hand and took out a strip of black crystal from the leaf-shaped diamond fey storage box. When Lin Yuan took out the strip of black crystal, it immediately had a jade-like luster. The black crystal that Lin Yuan took out was a completely jade-textured agarwood. When Lin Yuan saw that Gao Feng was rather fond of the agarwood's burning smell, he thought of giving one to Gao Feng. Lin Yuan did this because he wanted to make a business friend with Gao Feng. In the future he could also trade with Gao Feng to exchange for some resources that he couldn't obtain in the rare lifeform pavilion. In the Spirit Qi Awakening era, Radiance dollars might have powerful purchasing power. However, some rare spiritual ingredients and fays had strategic significance and value that couldn't be measured with Radiance dollars. The elemental shellfish was such a fay. The elemental shellfish could produce elemental pearls in an environment with a high concentration of spirit qi. The elemental pearls produced by ordinary elemental shellfish contained a variety of pure elemental energy. The elemental energy contained in the elemental pearls produced by the elemental shellfish could be completely absorbed by the fae. Under normal circumstances, when a fae devoured spiritual ingredients, it would only be able to absorb a little bit of the corresponding elemental energy. Even if a creation master concocted the spiritual ingredients into a spirit fluid, the fae wouldn't be able to absorb a lot of elemental energy from the spirit fluid concocted by the creation master, and it would be a huge waste. It was the same as a fae absorbing spirit qi. When a creation master concocted a spirit fluid to enhance a fae, even if it was concocted by a pinnacle class 4 creation master, the fae wouldn't be able to completely absorb it. However, Lin Yuan could use his body to transfer the spirit qi in the world to the fae's body, allowing the fae to completely absorb it. The elemental pearls and elemental energy produced by the elemental shellfish had the same effect as Lin Yuan's body and spirit qi. However, after Lin Yuan obtained the elemental shellfish, he was going to induce the elemental shellfish to mutate. He was going to induce 2 of the 4 infant elemental shellfish to mutate into the aquamarine elemental shellfish. It would produce elemental pearls that contained pure water elements. The other 2 infant elemental shellfish would be induced to mutate into the celestine elemental shellfish. It would produce elemental pearls that contained pure qi elements. A high concentration of pure spirit qi wasn't worth mentioning to Lin Yuan as it was everywhere in the spirit lock spatial zone. With the aquamarine elemental shellfish and the celestine elemental shellfish, it was equivalent to having elemental pearls that contained pure water elements and elemental pearls that contained pure qi elements. By then, if Lin Yuan wanted to nurture the water and qi dual-type floating island whale, it wouldn't be a problem anymore. Gao Feng was also a forthright person. As a direct descendant of the Gao family, Gao Feng usually had his own schemes. However, in his heart, Gao Feng had already treated Lin Yuan as someone on the same level as him and had the intention to befriend him. Now that Lin Yuan had given him such a precious, completely jade-textured agarwood, Gao Feng couldn't help but feel a little touched. Gao Feng could not help but feel a little touched. He took out an ice blue jade brocade box from the flower-shaped diamond fey storage box on his wrist. When this ice blue jade brocade box was taken out, it immediately emitted a chilling intent. Baidu was the first to read the latest chapter of the Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 253. Gao Feng handed the icy blue jade brocade box to Lin Yuan and said, "All right, let's go. Brother, I will ask my family to mail the 4 infant elemental shellfish to you from Wind Mist City through Ostrich Logistics." Lin Yuan took the jade box that Gao Feng handed over and did not reject it. When he opened the brocade box, he saw a giant dark blue scale of an unknown fae. These scales contained extremely powerful water element energy and dragon might. It was obvious that this scale came from a powerful dragon species fae that lived in the sea. He waved his hand and stored the ice blue jade brocade box into his leaf-shaped diamond fae storage box. Upon seeing this, Gao Feng also put the completely jade-textured agarwood back into the flower-shaped diamond face storage box hanging on his wrist. Giving gifts after a transaction was an expression of goodwill and a desire to befriend the other party. Gao Feng was naturally very happy about this situation. However, when Gao Feng saw that he already had 2 bronze/epic spirit spring lilies and 1 bronze/epic yellow spring lily, he was both happy and troubled. This was because he wanted to become a pure support-type spirit chi professional, and he had done it now. However, the problem of him not having any teammates had not been solved, and this made Gao Feng very frustrated. Lin Yuan asked when he saw Gao Feng's expression constantly changing as he looked at the 3 bronze/epic phase he had nurtured. Is there any problem with the exclusive skills comprehended by these bronze/epic phase at bronze? When he had enhanced the 3 spirit spring lilies, he had upgraded them from elite to epic. This way, when these 3 spirit spring lilies were promoted to bronze, Lin Yuan would have 3 chances to choose an exclusive skill. In his opinion, be it the 2 spirit spring lilies or the yellow spring lily, the exclusive skills he had chosen were very good. Lin Yuan had chosen based on Gao Feng's situation. Gao Feng hurriedly replied, "That's not the case. Be it these 2 spirit spring lilies or this yellow spring lily, their exclusive skills at bronze are very suitable for me." At this point, Gao Feng felt that it was really a coincidence. In Gao Feng's mind, he would never have thought that Lin Yuan had specifically chosen the exclusive skill that would be produced when a Fei evolved to bronze based on his situation. Gao Feng thought that Lin Yuan already had these 3 bronze/epic Feis. Gao Feng had not told him that he had changed his mind and wanted the spirit spring lilies. Moreover, it had only been over 4 hours since he had changed his mind. In such a short period of time, Gao Feng did not dare to guess that the 2 spirit spring lilies and the yellow spring lily had just been promoted to bronze/epic. Gao Feng sighed 3 times and said, "My previous contracted Fei was a breeze hibiscus, but it has been promoted to a gold/fantasy breed Fei. In addition to these 2 spirit spring lilies and this yellow spring lily, my 4 contracted Feis are purely supportive. I might not even be able to defeat a spirit chi professional with a silver power offense type Fei. I don't know what my father is thinking this year. He still wants me to participate in the Radiance 100 sequence selection. It will be embarrassing enough for me to go in. Even if I have a gold/fantasy breed breeze hibiscus, it doesn't have the ability to attack and it will be beaten out in an instant. I have always wanted to find a stable and reliable team, but I can't find a suitable one. It's too difficult for me." Gao Feng had opened up a chatterbox and told Lin Yuan about his worries. Lin Yuan listened to Gao Feng's words and said, "I don't need a silver power offense type Fei." Gao Feng's contracted Feis were at the extreme. They were all weak plant species Feis. They didn't have attack abilities and weren't good at attacking. Their plant bodies were also very weak. If such a way of contracting Feis was in a stable team, and if the other team members were strong enough individually, Gao Feng would be a god-tier support. If such a method of contracting Feis was used in a stable team, and if the other team members were individually strong enough, Gao Feng would be a god-class support. If the teammates were not strong enough and the teammates carried Gao Feng, it would be the same as 4 against 5. This was because Gao Feng's role was only to make a strong team stronger. In a weak team, even if Gao Feng enhanced his teammates, helped his teammates and the friendly Feis on the battlefield to recover spirit power, protected the core Feis and increased the tolerance for mistakes, it still wouldn't be of any decisive use. However, it still wouldn't be of any decisive use. If he wasn't strong enough, he would still be beaten up. In Lin Yuan's opinion, Gao Feng was indeed too difficult. When Gao Feng heard Lin Yuan's words, he was immediately flabbergasted. According to normal operations, shouldn't Lin Yuan be consoling himself at this moment? Why isn't he playing by the rules? In less than 2 hours, the 4 infant elemental shellfish that were still in hibernation were transported from Wind Mist City's Gao family to Lin Yuan's hands. Gao Feng looked at the 4 infant elemental shellfish that weren't even as big as the amber buttons on Lin Yuan's sleeves. Once these 4 infant elemental shellfish are awakened from their hibernation by spirit chi, if there isn't a high-concentration spirit chi environment for them to survive within 5 minutes, the elemental shellfish will immediately die. Gao Feng was very serious when he said this. What Gao Feng said was a bloody lesson that the Gao family had learned after losing a few infant elemental shellfish when they were nurturing the elemental shellfish. If Gao Feng didn't treat Lin Yuan as a friend, he wouldn't have said such words. Lin Yuan immediately stored the 4 elemental shellfish into the Spirit Lock spatial zone. With the high concentration spirit qi in the Spirit Lock spatial zone, the 4 infant elemental shellfish would immediately awaken from their hibernation and absorb a large amount of high-purity spirit qi. Lin Yuan planned to mutate 2 elemental shellfish into aquamarine elemental shellfish and 2 into celestine elemental shellfish. Then he would stop the elemental shellfish's grade at elite/epic and prevent them from evolving to bronze. If the elemental shellfish were to evolve to bronze, they would evolve into another shellfish Fei, the exploding pearl shellfish. When they evolved to bronze, the exploding pearl shellfish would enhance their offensive capabilities. The elemental pearls produced by the bronze exploding pearl shellfish would become bombs that contained elemental energy, and other Feis wouldn't be able to perfectly absorb them. If that was the case, Lin Yuan would be at a huge loss. After Gao Feng completed the transaction with Lin Yuan, he asked for Lin Yuan's private communication software and added each other as friends. Before leaving, Gao Feng suddenly said, "Brother, you have so many completely jade textured with spirit materials. I wonder if you have any surplus you want to sell?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan replied, "I have a lot of completely jade textured with spirit materials here. If you want to trade, we can contact each other on the phone." When Gao Feng heard this, he was overjoyed. Gao Feng could not help but think that if he could get a lot of jade-textured wood from Lin Yuan, his old fogies would be so happy. This was because to the rich and powerful, having furniture or ornaments made of completely jade-textured wood placed in their homes represented their heritage and prestige. After Gao Feng left, Lin Yuan looked at the time. It was already dusk. He left his mansion and headed in the direction of the Radiant Moon Palace. After visiting his master, the Moon Empress, Lin Yuan couldn't wait to go out and train. Baidu, read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 254. When Lin Yuan arrived at the Leaning Moon Mountain, he happened to see Jin Qi, who was wearing a light yellow spirit attendant robe, tidying up the dead branches that some plant phase had shed after they had evolved. When Jin Qi saw Lin Yuan, she quickly bowed and greeted, "Greetings, Lord Lin Yuan." Then he hurriedly went to other places to clean up the environment of the Leaning Moon Mountain. Jin Qi did not know why, but when she saw Lin Yuan now, she no longer had the same thoughts as before. There was only awe and fear. Ever since when Yu was chosen as her assistant, Jin Qi had been living in fear. He was always afraid that when Yu would find fault with him. Even Lin Yuan would help when Yu deal with him. Jin Qi now understood that even when Yu could deprive her of her qualification as a spirit attendant with just a word, let alone Lin Yuan, the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord. Lin Yuan, who was heading toward the Radiant Moon Palace, did not know Jin Qi's thoughts. If Lin Yuan knew, he would definitely think that if a person was suffering from persecutory delusions, they would need to be treated quickly. Of course, if a person did not do anything wrong, it would be difficult for him to suffer from a mental illness such as persecutory delusion. When Lin Yuan arrived at the Radiant Moon Palace's entrance, he saw his master, the Moon Empress, holding an emerald green bottle that contained a light purple spirit liquid. As the Moon Empress' wrist shook, the pale purple spirit fluid churned. Lin Yuan felt as though ancient trees that pierced through the clouds had appeared in front of him. The ancient tree contained a majestic life force. This life force seemed to be able to lift up the heavens. The Moon Empress circulated her spirit power, and the spirit liquid in the bottle turned into 2 wisps of purple gas that wound around the 2 diamond/legend silver stamen gold luster caches beside the Radiant Moon Palace. The 2 diamond/legend silver stamen gold luster cache absorbed the 2 wisps of faint purple spirit qi. One of the branches and leaves became more luxuriant, while the other seemed to wither in an instant. All of the leaves, including the remaining flowers of the silver stamen gold luster cache, turned into ashes in an instant. The Moon Empress had already noticed Lin Yuan's arrival and waved at him. "Let's go. Follow me to the back of the palace. This silver stamen gold luster cache has lived up to expectations. When it sprouts, it will be promoted to the suzerain tier. I didn't waste the suzerain tear blood wood, the freedom canopy, and the holy river to concoct this spiritual liquid. He was currently using true data to observe the 2 silver stamen gold luster caches in front of the radiant moon palace. The withered silver stamen gold luster cache had obviously comprehended a willpower rune and was accumulating energy to advance to the suzerain tier. After reaching suzerain, if it could withstand the world cleansing, it would become a myth breed fae. As for the other silver stamen gold luster cache, although its growth looked gratifying, it actually had a tree full of flower buds in late autumn. But in essence there wasn't much improvement. At that moment Lin Yuan felt his spirit jolt, and a feeling of enlightenment surged in his heart. He felt that this feeling of enlightenment was still a little lacking. As long as that strand was broken, he would be able to comprehend another willpower rune. The Moon Empress sensed Lin Yuan's change and smiled. As long as I have an understanding of the world, obtaining a willpower rune is only a matter of time. I don't have to worry too much about the understanding in my mind and just let nature take its course. Lin Yuan nodded. Lin Yuan had always been open-minded, so he wouldn't worry too much about the willpower rune he hadn't comprehended and the feeling of being in the clouds. This feeling of being just a little short of enlightenment was a little like a person wanting to sneeze but being stuck and almost unable to sneeze. After entering the Radiant Moon Palace's main hall, Lin Yuan had a question-and-answer exercise with the Moon Empress. This question-and-answer exercise went on for a long time. It was mainly because during this period of time, as Lin Yuan's strength got stronger and he came into contact with more things, he could increasingly feel his shallowness. However, the question-and-answer exercise with the Moon Empress perfectly made up for his shallowness. As long as Lin Yuan asked the Moon Empress about all his doubts, a few words from the Moon Empress would allow Lin Yuan to have a thorough understanding of the previous problems. At the same time, the Moon Empress questions were also a process for Lin Yuan to consolidate. This question-and-answer exercise had resolved many of Lin Yuan's doubts. This feeling of benefiting greatly made Lin Yuan feel very comfortable. Lin Yuan told the Moon Empress about his idea of going out to train. The Moon Empress listened carefully to Lin Yuan's thoughts with a smile on her face, her eyes filled with pride for her child. The Moon Empress knew Lin Yuan's current strength. At first she was very surprised when she found out, but she had never taken the initiative to ask Lin Yuan. In the Moon Empress' opinion, every spirit chi professional should have their own opportunities and secrets. As Lin Yuan's master, the Moon Empress had always been standing behind Lin Yuan and silently watching her disciples' progress. The Moon Empress always blamed herself a little for not helping Lin Yuan enough on his path of growth. However, as a pinnacle expert, how could the Moon Empress not appreciate her disciples' self-reliance and self-improvement? Without such character and perseverance, how could he have the possibility of becoming a true expert? After Lin Yuan finished speaking, he looked at his master, the Moon Empress. Master, I plan to participate in the Radiance 100 sequence selection after I come back from the training. Then Lin Yuan told the Moon Empress about the process he had gone through to participate in the Radiance 100 sequence selection. Although the Moon Empress already knew about it, she didn't stop it and listened quietly. From the Moon Empress' point of view, it was the happiest thing for a teacher when her own disciple told her about his achievements. At night, Lin Yuan stayed for dinner at the Radiant Moon Palace. Before leaving the Radiant Moon Mountain, the Moon Empress stopped Lin Yuan and handed him a very ordinary-looking wooden token that was carved with a crescent moon. The first and last crescent moons seemed to be rotating non-stop, and each rotation lasted for a month. Lin Yuan looked at the wooden sign in confusion. The Moon Empress stepped forward and said, "This is a source-type item called the Extreme Token. My Fey, Cold Moon Lone Disk's Moonlight domain is sealed inside. It can be used as a trump card to protect yourself apart from the Mother of Bloodbath." When the Moon Empress said this, there was a faint smile on her face. Although the Moon Empress had found the Mother of Bloodbath as a path protector, it could be said to be a perfect plan. However, as a teacher, how could he truly be at ease when it came to the safety of his disciple? Lin Yuan suddenly felt his eyes dry up as he looked at this very ordinary-looking source-type extreme token. Lin Yuan could feel a kind of love from the depths of the soul. This was a kind of selfless love for the best. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan and reached out to help him tidy up the collar of his clothes. "Disciple, since you've chosen to go on your own, you can try to establish a faction that belongs to you. The Radiance Federation is peaceful and happy because it is strong enough and no one dares to invade it. However, the world outside the Radiance Federation is a mixture of good and evil. Sooner or later, it will be a world you will have to explore. Remember, no matter what, I will always be your strongest support. With me around, no matter what you do, even if you poke a hole in the sky, no one in this world can touch you. When she said this, 2 crescent moons seemed to form in the Moon Empress' eyes, constantly condensing and disappearing. Baidu, read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 255. Finally, the Moon Empress waved her hand and said in a warm voice, "Go. I'll cook something delicious for you when you come back." It was already late at night when Lin Yuan went down the Leaning Moon Mountain. The cold autumn wind blew on Lin Yuan's body, giving him an indescribable feeling. This feeling was ambition and lofty sentiments. In Lin Yuan's opinion, a man should be upright and broad-minded. Even if he did not go through the life and death tribulation and sweep away the turbidity of the universe, he should at least take revenge while he was young. Lin Yuan no longer had too much pressure from the outside world, whether it was to survive or improve his strength. Even if there was pressure in terms of strength, it was given by Lin Yuan himself. Lin Yuan could be said to be a young hero for having such strength at the age of 18. When he heard the Moon Empress words just now, Lin Yuan suddenly had the idea of forming a private faction. Although Lin Yuan had the idea of forming a guild club before, it could not be considered a private faction. However, a guild with the nature of a club couldn't be considered a private force. Especially now that Lin Yuan had the floating island whale, which could be called a strategic resource of the world. Lin Yuan could completely establish a private faction of his own on the floating island whale's back. When the floating island whale grew up, it would be like a giant beast with a floating city on its back. The floating island whale could carry the city on its back on the surface of the sea, but it could also carry the city on its back and float in the clouds. If he built a faction on the back of the floating island whale, which could be called a strategic resource of the world, then Lin Yuan's faction could go anywhere in this big world. It could be said that the floating island whale was the foundation of Lin Yuan's private faction. However, how many resources would be consumed to form such a huge private faction? Therefore, the collection of resources had become the primary problem Lin Yuan had to face. Previously, Lin Yuan had also started to collect source-type items. He did not care if they were useful to himself or his friends. He only treated these source-type items as a kind of strategic material. But now that Lin Yuan had plans to establish his own private faction, the speed of collecting strategic resources was obviously only a drop in the bucket. Suddenly, Lin Yuan thought of Gao Feng's reaction when he saw the furniture made of completely jade-textured wood. As a core member of Wind Mist City's Gao family, Gao Feng still loved and cherished this completely jade-textured wood. It could be seen that this completely jade-textured wood had a vast market among the rich and powerful families. It wasn't that completely jade-textured wood was so rare that it couldn't be found. On the contrary, completely jade-textured wood was much more common than some truly precious spiritual materials in phase. However, such a situation had occurred because this completely jade-textured wood was crazily sought after by people with status in the Radiance Federation, and the market was simply too vast. As long as completely jade-textured wood appeared on the market, it would immediately be snatched up by the big families. Wealthy families would never let go of the opportunity to buy completely jade-textured wood. No matter how much jade-textured wood there was, as long as he could afford it, he would buy it and store it. This was because the ornaments and furniture made of jade-textured wood, even if they were just small ornaments, represented the heritage and face of a wealthy family to a certain extent. Lin Yuan's Spirit Lock spatial zone was now 80 square meters in size, and it did not look small. Apart from the area occupied by the Spirit Pool and the Pure Land of Bliss, there was still more than half of the Spirit Lock spatial zone that could be set up. However, Lin Yuan had never done detailed planning and integration of the empty spaces in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Therefore, there were still plenty of empty spaces in the Spirit Lock spatial zone that could be used again. Moreover, more than half of the large batch of wood that Lin Yuan had stored in the Spirit Lock spatial zone had been used up after building the red sandalwood longevity fish tank and some jade-textured furniture. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to store more precious wood in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. At the same time, he would place some phase that would transform in an environment with a pure spirit chi concentration in the spirit lock spatial zone. As for those spiritual materials that could transform in an extremely high spirit chi concentration, Lin Yuan did not plan to place them in the spirit lock spatial zone anymore. Firstly, it was too troublesome for Lin Yuan to collect those spiritual materials that could transform in the Star Web's rare lifeform pavilion. Secondly, it was because those spiritual materials that could transform in an extremely high spirit chi concentration might have a longer transformation period than completely jade-textured wood. Moreover, the purchase price was much higher than those ordinary wood that could produce completely jade-textured wood under a large amount of spirit chi concentration in the spirit lock spatial zone. Finally, these spiritual materials that could transform in an extremely high spirit chi concentration were not only not as wide as completely jade-textured wood in the market. They might not even be as good as completely jade-textured wood in terms of price. After all, completely jade-textured wood not only had actual value, but it also had the additional value of symbolizing foundation and face. After Lin Yuan made full use of the empty spaces in the spirit lock spatial zone, these completely jade-textured rare would cultivated in the spirit lock spatial zone and rare phase that would transform in an environment with a pure spirit chi concentration were Lin Yuan's trump cards and capital to build his faction. Since Lin Yuan had the idea of building a faction, he also had the method and idea to accumulate resources. What Lin Yuan had to do was to accumulate resources bit by bit. Then he would plan how to establish his faction's embryonic form. All of this could not be done overnight, so Lin Yuan was not in a hurry. He planned to first consolidate the foundation of the faction's embryonic form. After all, the floating island whale had not hatched yet, and before it became a fantasy breed, it could not become a giant beast that could support a city on its back. When Lin Yuan returned to the mansion, he saw Wen Yu carefully folding his clothes one by one. She placed the clothes he needed to go out on adventures in a button-shaped diamond face storage box that was very similar to his source-type source sand. Hu Quan, on the other hand, was carving a completely jade-textured peach wood with a gleaming knife. The completely jade-textured peach wood showed a kind of agate-like luster, and Hu Quan quickly carved a somewhat decaying peach tree. The branches of this decaying peach tree strangely had a kind of dragon-like beauty. On the ground at the base of the sculpture, some peach branches scattered from the decaying peach tree gave off a lush feeling that peaches could grow immediately. Lin Yuan could not help but sigh. Mercury's essence flows upstream in the sky, and the spring breeze turns into a blue dragon's head. Occasionally, its roots and leaves touch the soil, scattering into the world of flowers. When Hu Quan heard Lin Yuan's words, the carving knife in his hand immediately sped up and carved Lin Yuan's poem on the base of the peachwood sculpture. Lin Yuan, after working here for a few days, the materials used for carving are much better than what I usually see in a year. Lin Yuan replied, Uncle Hu, if you're not afraid of hard work, I have a lot of good materials for carving. You can choose all kinds of jade-textured wood. Hu Quan's eyes immediately lit up. This kind of brightness was even brighter than the eyes of a weasel looking at an old hen. How can this be considered tiring? What else could be more enjoyable than this? When you looked up at Hu Quan and couldn't help showing an expression of admiration. When you felt that Hu Quan was really an excellent tool who worked tirelessly in the midst of happiness. When you handed the amber button-shaped diamond face storage box to Lin Yuan and said, That's right. Young master, I've prepared all the resources you'll need for tomorrow's training in this diamond face storage box. Although young master is only going to train for a few months, I've prepared 3 years' worth of clothing, food, fruits and water. Baidu read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 256. Lin Yuan took the amber button-shaped diamond face storage box and checked it. He found that there were all kinds of materials placed in different categories in this amber button-shaped diamond face storage box. Every kind of material was carefully placed in a fixed position in the button-shaped diamond face storage box. Even the food for each meal was carefully packed. Obviously, this arrangement had taken her a lot of effort. This amber button-shaped diamond face storage box had been specially customized by Lin Yuan at Ostrich Logistics. It had taken Lin Yuan half a month to get this amber button-shaped diamond face storage box. This amber button-shaped diamond phase storage box was different from Lin Yuan's leaf-shaped and beetle-shaped diamond phase storage boxes. The leaf-shaped and beetle-shaped diamond phase storage boxes were both brooch-shaped, but this button-shaped diamond phase storage box looked like a cufflink. Lin Yuan wore this amber button-shaped diamond phase storage box on his cufflink. Then he let the source-type source sand stick to the amber button-shaped phase storage box on his cufflink. This way, when Lin Yuan used the source sand in the future, no one would notice that the amber button-shaped object on his cufflink had disappeared for no reason. This was also a means for Lin Yuan to hide his source-type source sand. Hu Quan came up at that moment and chuckled. Lin Yuan, you just said that there are all kinds of completely jade-textured wood. I wonder if you still take it seriously? Lin Yuan looked at Hu Quan's eager expression and knew that if he did not give these completely jade-textured materials to Hu Quan today, he would probably not be able to sleep well tonight. It just so happened that Lin Yuan was going to set off for training tomorrow morning and would not be in the mansion during this time. Lin Yuan simply took out the remaining completely jade-textured wood in his spirit lock spatial zone. Hu Quan looked at the completely jade-textured wood that emitted all kinds of colors and could not help but stare with his eyes about to pop out of their sockets. Hu Quan was so happy that he screamed like a child. Uncle Hu, see which parts of the manor and house need to be decorated with these completely jade-textured wood. You can decide on the design yourself. When I come back from my training, I'll give you a new batch of completely jade-textured wood. Lin Yuan intended to keep the completely jade-textured wood for his own use in his mansion. If he were to trade with other affluent families, he would only need to take out an entire piece of jade-textured wood. Those wealthy families generally worshipped high-star spirit craftsmen. For the completely jade-textured wood, which was like gold and jade, only by designing it into the shape that the owner wanted could it be considered to bring out the best in each other. He no longer had any completely jade-textured wood on hand. Since he wanted to integrate the space in the Spirit Lock spatial zone, the best use of the space in the Spirit Lock spatial zone was to divide it reasonably. Not only did he have to use flat space, but he also had to use high space. Therefore Lin Yuan asked Hu Quan to pull a few pieces of very large wutong wood and build 2 huge shelves for himself. Lin Yuan had designed these wutong wood shelves to be very wide and thick, so he could put the whole wooden board in them one by one. When Hu Quan was making these huge shelves of wutong wood for Lin Yuan, he was still muttering in his heart. Lin Yuan had completely jade-textured wood, but he was now using ordinary wutong wood that could be bought for tens of thousands of Federation dollars to make a shelf. What was the use of making the shelf so big? Hu Quan could not help but sigh. I really can't understand the world of the rich. However, as a Class 4 spirit craftsman, Hu Quan had directly sculpted this huge shelf when he was creating it. Each wutong wood was engraved with phoenix feathers, with a phoenix spreading its wings and wanting to fly perched on them. The wutong wood had always been known as the habitat of the phoenix, a fictional creature recorded in ancient books and records. The phoenix cries on the high hill. The wutong tree grows on the morning sun. It was a kind of tree that symbolized light. Even though the shelf was made of ordinary wutong wood, it was immediately made into an exquisite object by Hu Quan. With a wave of his hand, Lin Yuan stored these 2 huge shelves into the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Before the Spirit Qi awakening, the phoenix only existed in ancient books and records, and it was considered a fictional creature. However, after the Spirit Qi awakening, some powerful avian phase had evolved with similarities to the legendary phoenix. Take Chime, for example. If Lin Yuan had seen Chime use the radiant body in his previous life, he would probably have recognized Chime as a phoenix when it used the radiant body. Since Lin Yuan was going out to train tomorrow, he returned to his room early in the morning. However, he was not in a hurry to sleep. Instead, he planned to buy a batch of supplies on Star Web tonight. At the same time, he would also evolve and mutate the 4 elemental shellfish that were living very freely under the high spirit Qi concentration in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Lin Yuan first entered his Spirit Lock spatial zone and placed these 2 large shelves made of wutong wood at the edge of the Spirit Lock spatial zone. These 2 large shelves occupied 1/3 of the Spirit Lock spatial zone's 80 square meter area. After tidying up the Spirit Lock spatial zone, Lin Yuan sorted out many places that he had not used before. Then he transferred all the Radiance dollars in the beetle-shaped diamond face storage box into his amber button-shaped diamond face storage box. the leaf-shaped diamond face storage box was still filled with all kinds of dimensional lifeforms' flesh that stretched as far as the eye could see. Now Lin Yuan's beetle-shaped diamond face storage box was considered empty. Lin Yuan planned to use this beetle-shaped diamond face storage box as a place to store all the supplies he needed in the Spirit Lock spatial zone in the future. Since Lin Yuan wanted to fully utilize the Spirit Lock spatial zone, the consumption of energy ores was much higher than before. The floating island whale and the elemental shellfish consumed a lot of pure spiritual power. Morbius spirit chi condensation also consumed a lot of spirit chi when it condensed spirit chi crystals. In addition, Lin Yuan was also preparing to nurture those phase that would mutate under the high spirit chi concentration, so the consumption of energy ores would increase exponentially. Previously, Lin Yuan's energy ore reserves were already far from reaching the standard. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to fill this beetle-shaped diamond face storage box to the brim with energy ores. At the same time, Lin Yuan decided to increase the quality of energy ores he purchased in the future. He would no longer purchase low-grade energy ores but mid-grade energy ores. He would read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 257. Lin Yuan still had to store a large batch of rare wood. In the future, as long as the wood in the Spirit Lock spatial zone was completely jade textured, Lin Yuan could take them out and place them in this beetle-shaped diamond face storage box. Then he would place a new batch of ordinary wood on the parasol wood shelf. This way there would not be any waste in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Lin Yuan already had plans for those precious phase that would transform in an environment with a high concentration of spirit chi. The purchase with no loss store had always only sold silver usnias and elite spirit siphon goldfish on sale. Now he could add another type for buyers to choose from. Lin Yuan believed that when these phase, which could only transform in a high concentration of spirit chi, appeared in his purchase with no loss store, at that time, people would think of all sorts of ways to snatch them. However, Lin Yuan did not intend to use radiance dollars to trade for such phase. Instead, he planned to exchange for some spiritual ingredients that rarely appeared in the rare lifeform pavilion. For example, the day and night spirit silver. Although such spiritual ingredients were also sold in the rare lifeform pavilion, it was not so easy to purchase them. Otherwise, he would not have thought of using any kind of bronze/epic phase to post a trade message in his purchase with no loss store at that time. Lin Yuan went on Star Web and ordered a huge batch of mid-grade energy ores under Zhou Xian's dumbfounded expression. Lin Yuan first mailed his beetle-shaped diamond face storage box to Zhou Xian through Ostrich Logistics. Then Zhou Xian would fill the beetle-shaped diamond face storage box and mail it to Lin Yuan through Ostrich Logistics. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to transport such a large batch of energy ores through Ostrich Logistics. Then Lin Yuan spent nearly 100 radiance dollars in a Star Web wood store to purchase a large batch of precious wood. The wood that Lin Yuan had prepared previously was not considered very expensive. Apart from red sandalwood, which was considered precious, the other wood could only be considered relatively ordinary. The more precious the wood, the higher the price of the jade-textured wood. Therefore, Lin Yuan only chose 5 types of precious wood in the Star Web wood store. Among them were yellow rosewood, chicken wing wood, ebony, green elm and golden nanmu. These 5 types of completely jade-textured wood were currently the most expensive on the market. Since he wanted to integrate the resources, he naturally had to choose the completely jade-textured wood that was relatively expensive in the market to nurture. Of course, Lin Yuan had also purchased a few large pieces of high-class agarwood. After these agarwood trees were completely jade-textured, he planned to use them as consumables in his mansion. Lin Yuan chose a fei that was very useful to creation masters when there was a high concentration of spirit chi that would undergo a metamorphosis. This fei was a kind of succulent plant, and the lowest grade of this succulent plant was at bronze. This kind of spirit item was called silk pearls. The silk pearls were the most unpopular among the bronze meaty feis. The bronze silk bead might be a healing type fei, but its healing ability was too special. The string of pearls would use the dew produced by the plant to drip on the target's wounds to heal injuries. Although the ability looked similar to other healing type feis, the string of pearls could heal the target's wounds. Although the ability looked similar to other healing type feis, when the string of pearls juice dripped on the wounds, it would be accompanied by unbearable pain. Therefore, even if healing-type spirit chi professionals were in short supply, if they only contracted a healing-type fey like the String of Pearls, they would immediately become the most unpopular existence among all healing-type spirit chi professionals. Many teams would rather wait for other healing-type spirit chi professionals or bring along a support-type spirit chi professional than to endure the bone-deep pain after being injured. However, the bronze succulent plant, the String of Pearls, would transform into a new kind of fey, the flower brocade pearl, in a high-purity spirit chi environment. The flower brocade pearl would still produce dew, but it could be placed in the spirit fluid made from multiple spiritual ingredients, increasing the speed of the spiritual ingredients fusion. Of course, this speed increase would not improve the Creation Master's standard. However, it could shorten the time it took for the Creation Master to concoct the spirit fluid. When concocting the spirit fluid, a Creation Master had to be highly focused, and a slight distraction would cause the spirit fluid concoction to fail. To a certain extent, the flower brocade pearl could shorten the time it took for the Creation Master to concoct the spirit fluid. It was the same as slightly reducing the failure rate. It was not easy for a Creation Master to successfully concoct a spirit fluid, and it would often require a lot of effort. In fact, they would need to fail several times and waste a lot of spiritual ingredients before they could succeed once. Therefore, any Creation Master that laid eyes on the flower brocade pearls would do everything they could to purchase them. If there was anyone in this world who had the easiest money to earn, it would definitely be the wealthy Creation Masters. Lin Yuan had chosen the String of Pearls because he wanted it to transform into the flower brocade pearl under the high-purity spirit chi concentration. One of the reasons was that the flower brocade pearl's appearance would increase the success rate of Creation Masters concocting spirit fluids. It would also allow more spirit chi professionals to have the opportunity to heal phase and recover their damaged roots. The Radiance Federation's Creation Master resources were extremely scarce. Even if a Creation Master's success rate in concocting the spirit fluid was slightly increased, they would be able to spare more time to change the fates of spirit chi professionals with damaged roots and earn more Radiance dollars. At the same time, it would also allow Lin Yuan to harvest more Creation Masters leaks. Another reason was that although the String of Pearls was a bronze fey, they were very small. It was because of this reason that Lin Yuan could increase the number of String of Pearls in the limited space in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. The bronze String of Pearls were very cheap, and many Star Web stores had chosen to carry out promotions for the bronze succulent plant String of Pearls. Lin Yuan had bought 1,000 bronze String of Pearls and only spent 800 Radiance dollars. Lin Yuan couldn't help but lament that the bronze String of Pearls were simply too cheap. However, when the bronze String of Pearls transformed into flower brocade pearls under the high concentration spirit chi concentration, the price would be hard to estimate. Fays like the flower brocade pearls were simply too rare and rarely appeared. Most of them were exchanged with other items, so there was no specific price to refer to. After all, Creation Masters would never look at the price when buying things. If they wanted to, they could just increase the price. Who asked Creation Masters to be rich and capricious? Baidu was the first to read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 258. The water-type and chi-type spiritual ingredients to induce the elemental shellfish to evolve were very easy to buy. As long as the elemental shellfish were induced by a single element spiritual ingredient in a pure spirit chi concentration, they would quickly mutate. After purchasing this batch of resources, Lin Yuan received the large amount of resources he had purchased more than an hour later. Lin Yuan chose 100 of the 1,000 silk beads and placed them in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Then he placed a portion of the large amount of wood on the shelves carved from parasol wood, filling up 2 shelves. The Spirit Lock spatial zone was now fully utilized by Lin Yuan. Next, Lin Yuan had to induce 2 of the 4 elemental shellfish to evolve into aquamarine elemental shellfish and 2 into celestine elemental shellfish. At the same time, Lin Yuan placed the crystal eggshell with the floating island whales green and white patterns in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Lin Yuan sensed it and found that the floating island whale's elemental eggshell had not absorbed the high-purity spirit chi in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. He knew that this was because pure water and air elements were still needed to be added at this time. Only then would the crystal eggshell that nurtured the floating island whale absorb the high-purity spirit qi, water, and air elements together. Only then could the floating island whale hatch bit by bit. Lin Yuan could not help but think that given the floating island whale's uniqueness, if it had not been brought out of the deep sea by the Gao family and met him, it probably would not have hatched. The spirit qi concentration in the depths of the sea was very high, and it could satisfy the ordinary island whale's spirit qi needs. At the same time, the seawater contained a lot of water elements. After a very long time, the ordinary island whale would absorb enough spirit qi and water elements and break out of the crystal eggshell. However, the floating island whale's incubation required the addition of air elements in addition to spirit qi and water elements. There were no air elements in the deep sea, so although the floating island whale had transformed into a more powerful life form, it was still a floating island whale. Perhaps the original intention of nature was not to allow this mutation to continue. Lin Yuan took the 4 elemental shellfish that had awakened from their infancy stage and circulated the spiritual power in his body to quickly inject spirit qi into the elemental shellfish. When the elemental shellfish reached Elite 9/Epic, Lin Yuan stopped the infusion of spirit qi. Then he took out the water elemental's spiritual ingredient, which was a very ordinary bronze seaweed that grew in the ocean. Under the influence of the high-purity spiritual energy and the fragments of the bronze-rank aquatic plant that contained water element, 2 of the elemental shellfish's originally white shells suddenly had dark blue veined patterns. These deep blue patterns were like the waves of the sea. At the same time, the elemental shellfish with deep blue wave-like patterns opened its shell, and the flesh inside gradually turned light blue. Finally, when the shells of the 2 elemental shellfish turned light blue, Lin Yuan knew that these 2 elemental shellfish had mutated into aquamarine elemental shellfish. Then he enhanced them from Elite 9/Epic to Elite X/Epic. Previously, he had not upgraded the elemental shellfish to Elite X because he was afraid that it would evolve on its own when it reached Elite X in the Spirit Lock spatial zone with such a high spirit qi concentration. However, now that the elemental shellfish had mutated into the aquamarine elemental shellfish, he no longer needed to worry. This was because the Elite X/Epic aquamarine elemental shellfish would only evolve again under the influence of water elemental spiritual ingredients. As long as Lin Yuan did not provide the aquamarine elemental shellfish with water elemental spiritual ingredients, it would never evolve from Elite X/Epic to bronze. Similarly, Lin Yuan also used very ordinary gas-type spiritual ingredients to induce the other 2 elemental shellfish to mutate into the Celestine elemental shellfish. The Elite X/Epic Celestine elemental shellfish's shell and flesh were pure cyan, and there were storm patterns on the shell. At that moment, Lin Yuan had evolved the 4 elemental shellfish into 2 Elite X/Epic aquamarine elemental shellfish and 2 Elite X/Epic Celestine elemental shellfish. The aquamarine elemental shellfish and Celestine elemental shellfish were now the size of a bowl. Lin Yuan saw that the aquamarine elemental shellfish and Celestine elemental shellfish were absorbing the inexhaustible high-purity spirit qi in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. In a short while, the aquamarine elemental shellfish produced an aquamarine thumb-sized pearl. The Celestine elemental shellfish also produced a thumb-sized Celestine pearl. Lin Yuan placed the 2 aquamarine elemental shellfish and the 2 Celestine elemental shellfish beside the crystal eggshell gestating the floating island whale. Whether it was the aquamarine elemental shellfish or the Celestine elemental shellfish, as long as the next elemental pearl was produced, the previous elemental pearl would be pushed out of the shell. It landed on the floating island whale's crystal eggshell. With the aquamarine elemental pearl that contained pure water elements and the Celestine elemental pearl that contained pure qi elements, the floating island whale began to truly absorb the high-concentration spirit qi in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. This time Lin Yuan finally witnessed what was called a whale swallowing all things. The floating island whale's single breath of spirit qi almost absorbed all the spirit qi in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. If the spirit pool was not like a bottomless pit that could decompose energy ores, as long as the spirit qi concentration in the Spirit Lock spatial zone did not reach the Spirit Lock spatial zone's limit, it would immediately decompose the energy ores to produce spirit qi. It was probably not enough to maintain the Spirit Lock spatial zone's spirit qi consumption. However, Lin Yuan had a diamond Fei storage box's mid-grade energy ores, which could completely support such consumption. After the floating island whale's crystal eggshell breathed in and out a few times, he could feel a hazy consciousness forming in the crystal eggshell that nurtured the floating island whale at that moment. Lin Yuan let the amber button-shaped source-type source sand at his cuff precipitate a feather formed by the day and night spirit silver. He took the feather formed by the day and night spirit silver and slashed it across his palm. Then he placed his palm on the floating island whale's crystal eggshell. The consciousness in the floating island whale's crystal eggshell seemed to have found something and absorbed the warm blood flowing out of Lin Yuan's palm. Lin Yuan could feel that the consciousness in the floating island whale's crystal eggshell was very lonely. However, after finding his blood in the lonely search, it was as if it had found its closest kin. After absorbing enough of his blood, the consciousness in the floating island whale's crystal eggshell emitted a childlike emotion. Lin Yuan smiled slightly. At this point, this floating island whale truly belonged to him. After exiting the spirit lock spatial zone, it was almost 3 a.m. Lin Yuan lay on the bed hugging Genius and Chimey, and fell into a deep sleep in the warm bed. The next morning the sky was bright and Lin Yuan opened his eyes. After having breakfast and saying goodbye to Wen Yu and Hu Quan, Lin Yuan embarked on a journey of training. The Moon Empress was feeding the platinum spirit siphon goldfish in the lotus pond in the inner palace. She looked at the lotus flowers in the pond and muttered, "I wonder how many diamond/legend lotuses in this pool will be able to comprehend the willpower rune and evolve into fantasy breeds after my spirit liquid is poured." Then the Moon Empress looked at the lotus pond and shouted softly, "Listen up, all of you. When spring comes, the lotus pond in the rear palace will only be planted with suzerain tier lotuses. Those that haven't reached the suzerain tier will be moved to the garden in front of the palace." These peak-stage diamond lotuses of various colors had already developed spiritual intelligence. When they heard the Moon Empress words, the lotuses and lotus pods swayed. At this time Xianyu walked to the back hall and said in a clear voice, "Moon Empress, young lord's assistant, Wen Yu has come to the Radiant Moon Palace to seek an audience with the Moon Empress. I wonder if the Moon Empress wishes to see Wen Yu?" If it was in the past, Wen Yu wouldn't even have the chance to seek an audience with the Moon Empress. Wen Yu wouldn't even have the chance to speak to Xianyu. Moreover, Xianyu had taken the initiative to ask the Moon Empress for Wen Yu's opinion. Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress didn't stop feeding the fish pellets one by one into the lotus pond. Instead she said, "Bring Wen Yu to the rear palace to see me." Hearing this, Xianyu acknowledged the order and left. At the same time Xianyu thought to herself. She didn't expect the Moon Empress to ask Wen Yu to seek an audience with the rear palace. The rear palace wasn't a place that ordinary people could enter as they wished. Even Class 5 creation masters like Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme wouldn't dare to take a step into the rear palace without the Moon Empress' permission. Wen Yu's identity had changed because of Lin Yuan's choice to choose her as his assistant. The lotus pond was full of dancing lotuses, and the fish were playing in the lotus pond causing ripples. Wen Yu was very nervous and was trying hard not to tremble. This was the first time Wen Yu had the chance to face the Moon Empress. The Moon Empress looked at Wen Yu calmly and asked in a cold voice, "Why do you seek an audience with me?" Wen Yu's eyes slowly changed from apprehension to incomparably firm. "Moon Empress, I want to become stronger." The Moon Empress didn't comment. "Why?" Wen Yu gritted her teeth and said stubbornly, "Moon Empress, I don't want to become a useless person by Lord Lin Yuan's side." Lin Yuan was walking on the royal capital's streets and holding his mobile phone, preparing to book a flying fei. Suddenly, the mother of Bloodbath's strange and pleasant voice entered his ears. "Lin Yuan, where do you plan to go for your first training trip?" Lin Yuan asked without any hesitation. "I plan to go to the Dimensional Rift's interior to train." Baidu read the latest chapter of the Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 259. Lin Yuan had already made plans for his training outside the Endless Forest. If he still went to the Endless Forest to harvest, he would only obtain some relatively rare and low-grade feis. As a creation master, it was easy for feis to have a favorable impression of him, so the danger he could encounter in the endless forest was very limited. Given Lin Yuan's current strength, even if he encountered a platinum fae, the gold eye/fantasy eye source sand would be able to put up a fight. In fact, Lin Yuan could even control the gold eye/fantasy eye source sand to kill low-grade platinum faes effortlessly. The source-type source sand's abilities developed in all aspects. Defense, attack, control, all of these abilities were well-rounded. However, ever since Lin Yuan had promoted the fantasy breed source sand to gold and enhanced its exclusive skill metal consume manifestation twice, the source sand's defense had been greatly improved. If Lin Yuan let the source sand precipitate the feathers formed by the day and night spirit silver to form 4 wings, the 4 wings on his back would spread out. The 4 wings on Lin Yuan's back opened up, and he just needed to circulate his spiritual power to transform the black wings of slaughter into white wings of protection. The white wings of protection could withstand an all-out attack from a platinum fae. However, if he resisted an all-out attack from a platinum fae, he would have to consume a lot of spiritual power to let the day and night spirit silver's feathers release the attack damage to the surrounding environment. Moreover, the source sand's exclusive skill, Sand Granule Spirit Acceptance, hid the heart-penetrating iron line, which was equivalent to a Platinum 3/Flawless Fae. Under a sudden all-out attack, few Platinum Faes could withstand it. Moreover, he was a creation master in the Endless Forest, and he was not willing to slaughter Faes wantonly. Therefore, since Lin Yuan wanted to experience a life-and-death training, there was no place more suitable than the inside of the Dimensional Rift. Upon hearing that, the Mother of Bloodbath replied, "There are a total of 4 types of dimensional rifts in the vicinity of the royal capital that are currently open and under control. Have you decided which one you want to train in?" There were a total of 5 types of dimensional rifts. Apart from a large number of dimensional faes, there were also some spiritual ingredients that could only be produced in the dimensional rifts. In the hands of creation masters, these spiritual ingredients were used to concoct spirit fluids to evolve faes and improve their quality. Therefore, near every major city in the Radiance Federation, there was a dimensional rift entrance that had been controlled by the Radiance Federation officials. These controlled dimensional rifts were good places for the Radiance Federation's younger generation to train. At the same time, it was also a good place for adventurers who accepted missions to harvest spiritual materials. In these controlled dimensional rifts, even if one couldn't find the spiritual ingredients in the dimensional rifts, killing some dimensional life forms and obtaining their flesh would be considered a considerable income. However, among the 5 types of dimensional rifts, only 4 were controlled by the Radiance Federation. The method to control a dimensional rift was to have multiple King-class expert squads cleanse a Class 3-dimensional rift. He then took 2 of the 3 source-type items produced by the Class 3-dimensional rift, leaving only 1. The remaining source-type item would maintain the dimensional rift's opening. Under such circumstances, the strength of the dimensional life forms in a Class 3-dimensional rift would decrease due to the decrease in source-type items. Each open dimensional rift was actually like a transit station. Outside the transit station was the human's real world, and on the other side was the dimensional life form's world. The area inside the dimensional rift was very large. When there was only 1 source-type item left in a Class 3-dimensional rift, it was equivalent to closing the gateway to the dimensional life form world. Therefore, the dimensional life forms that emerged from the other world in the controlled Class 3-dimensional rift could only maintain the standard of pinnacle Class 2-dimensional rifts. The 4 types of dimensional rifts controlled by the Radiance Federation were the Alien Insect Dimensional Rift, the Abyss Dimensional Rift, the Swamp Dimensional Rift, and the Underground Dimensional Rift. The 5th type of dimensional rift was uncontrollable by humans. This was because the 5th type of dimensional rift only opened in the ocean, and it was the Waterworld Dimensional Rift. Upon hearing the Mother of Bloodbath's words, Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and said, "Let's go train in the Abyss Dimensional Rift. Let's go to the Abyss Dimensional Rift to train." The life forms in the Abyss Dimensional Rift have the strongest individual strength and are most suitable for honing combat skills. The Alien Insect Dimensional Rift could be said to be Lin Yuan's old friend. The Alien Insect Dimensional Rift had always been said to be the strongest among the dimensional rifts that opened on land. This was because the number of insects that gushed out of the Alien Insect Dimensional Rift was far greater than the Abyss Dimensional Rift, the Swamp Dimensional Rift, and the Underground Dimensional Rift. However, the alien insect dimensional rift was nothing to Lin Yuan's source-type life form, Red Thorn, as long as Red Thorn had the chance to attack. Then the boundless insect sea would not be that big of a threat. Especially after Red Thorn became stronger, the sea of flowers that it spawned would also become more powerful. The sea of flowers spawned by Red Thorn would also be more harmful to those low-grade alien insects. As long as these low-grade alien insects entered the sea of flowers, they would immediately become fertilizer for Red Thorn. Among the 4 types of dimensional rifts, the swamp dimensional rift was the most unsuitable for training. This was because there were all kinds of strange marsh life forms hidden in the swamp dimensional rift. Most of the life forms in the swamp dimensional rift were highly toxic. In the muddy swamps of the swamp dimensional rift, there might be a deadly venomous dimensional life form hidden somewhere. Most of the underground dimensional rifts were filthy and ugly underground life forms. Apart from the water world dimensional rift, the earth dimensional rift was currently the least explored dimensional rift by humans. This was because there was almost no light in the underground dimensional rift, and the deeper one went, the darker it would be. Therefore, only some spirit chi professionals who had contracted phase with illumination functions would have the capital to explore the underground dimensional rift. The underground dimensional rift had an abundance of metals and spiritual ingredients. It was just like the day and night spirit silver that Lin Yuan had previously allowed the source sand to devour. It had been excavated from the underground dimensional rift. This was also the reason why the day and night spirit silver was rare and expensive. As for the abyss dimensional rift, it was mostly filled with extremely powerful abyssal demons. There were many types of demons in the abyss dimensional rift. Demons were also divided into grades like the alien insects. However, demons of the same grade would mostly have different abilities. The alien insect dimensional rifts were the strongest among the abyss dimensional rifts, the swamp dimensional rifts, and the underground dimensional rifts because of their numbers. Among the 4 types of dimensional rifts that opened on land, the abyss dimensional rift had the least number of dimensional life forms. However, the genetic model of dimensional life forms like the abyssal demons was relatively complex. Compared to other dimensional life forms from other dimensional rifts of the same grade, their individual strength was much stronger. Furthermore, many of the demons in the abyss dimensional rift were adept at using flames. The flames used by the demons in the abyss dimensional rift had withering characteristics and were extremely damaging to plant-type phase. The mother of Bloodbath muttered to himself for a moment, and that strange yet pleasant voice echoed in Lin Yuan's ears again. If you are going to the abyss dimensional rift to train, the Class 3 abyss dimensional rift outside the royal capital is more suitable for you. The Class 3 abyss dimensional rift outside the royal capital originally had 3 source-type items, but there is only 1 left now. Only Class 4 demons will appear in the dimensional rift, and the strongest Class 4 demon will only be equivalent to a Pinnacle Platinum Fae. The danger level is similar to that of a Pinnacle Class 2 dimensional rift, and it is very suitable for you to undergo life and death training. You can go all out and hone your combat skills. When your life is in danger, I will protect you. Lin Yuan was a little curious as to why the mother of Bloodbath, who usually did not speak much, suddenly spoke so much this time. Her attitude towards him had also changed quite a bit compared to before. Before Lin Yuan could think more, the mother of Bloodbath's strange yet pleasant voice echoed again. However, there are still 2 months before the active period of the dimensional rifts. At that time, the Radiance Federation officials will seal these Class 3 dimensional rifts that are controlled by the royal capital. Therefore, you have less than 2 months left to train in this Class 3 abyss dimensional rift. Lin Yuan nodded and immediately ordered a gold-flying Fey broad-winged gray swallow. Lin Yuan rode on the broad-winged gray swallow's back and headed toward the controlled Class 3 abyss dimensional rift not far from the royal capital. Baidu was the first to read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 260. When the mother of Bloodbath had experienced the world cleansing and evolved from suzerain/myth I to myth 2, it had known of Lin Yuan's strength. At that time, the mother of Bloodbath had not thought too much about it. However, when it recalled Lin Yuan's strength, it was shocked. In the mother of Bloodbath's opinion, even if Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple, it was too shocking for him to have such strength at this age. Therefore, the mother of Bloodbath had recommended Lin Yuan to train in the controlled class 3-dimensional rift. Lin Yuan sat on the gold broad-winged gray swallow's back and faced the late autumn morning wind with his eyes closed to rest. The gold broad-winged gray swallow's speed could be ranked in the top 3 among the gold wind-type phase that could be reserved in the royal capital. Although the gold broad-winged gray swallow was inferior to the platinum divine travel black swallow, it was much more comfortable than the platinum divine travel black swallow while taking into account its flying speed. At least when Lin Yuan sat on the gold broad-winged gray swallow's back, he would not feel his butt resting on it. The controlled class 3 abyss-dimensional rift outside the royal capital was not considered far from the royal capital. The gold broad-winged gray swallow only needed to fly for 2 to 3 hours to reach the location of the controlled class 3 abyss-dimensional rift. Lin Yuan got off the gold broad-winged gray swallow and looked at the entrance of the controlled class 3 abyss-dimensional rift. He could not help but sigh. At that moment, there were many vendors at the entrance of the controlled class 3 abyss-dimensional rift. These vendors were selling daily necessities. This scene reminded Lin Yuan of Millstone Town. However, Millstone Town had experienced close to 100 years of hardships and had already become a stable gathering place. Many spirit chi professionals had settled in Millstone Town for generations. However, although the entrance of the controlled class 3 abyss-dimensional rift looked similar to Millstone Town's market, it could not be maintained for long. However, if they wanted to maintain a business in this controlled class 3 abyss-dimensional rift's entrance, they would not be able to do so for long. After about every decade, the dimensional rift would enter an active phase. Once the dimensional rifts became active, dimensional rifts would open one after another all over the Radiance Federation in the next year. The first half of the year was fine as there were relatively few dimensional rifts. However, in the second half of the year, the frequency of these active dimensional rifts would increase. In the Radiance Federation's history, there was even a Class 4 dimensional rift that had opened during the active phase of the dimensional rifts. The Class 6 dimensional life forms in the Class 4 dimensional rift had the strength of a suzerain fae. Every time the dimensional rift was active, the Radiance Federation would enter a state of war preparation. This year was filled with danger, but it was also filled with opportunities. This was because the active phase of the dimensional rift every 10 years would contribute a large number of source-type items. However, for controlled Class 3-dimensional rifts, during the active phase of the dimensional rift, the only remaining source-type item had to be taken out. He would then destroy the controlled Class 3-dimensional rift. Otherwise, during the period of the dimensional rift riot, this originally controlled Class 3-dimensional rift might very well evolve into a Class 4-dimensional rift. At that time it would truly become a natural disaster. For controlled Class 3-dimensional rift entrances like the Radiance Federation, the Guild Alliance would set up branches. Here, spirit chi professionals could form teams and even accept missions related to the Abyss Dimensional Rift's spiritual ingredient collection. The Abyss Dimensional Rift did not produce any particularly precious spiritual ingredients. Even if there were, most of them were fire-attributed spiritual materials and were relatively simple. However, there was a special flame in the Abyss Dimensional Rift. This special flame was very magical. As long as spirit chi was injected into it, it would keep burning. This flame was rather useful for some lifestyle class spirit chi professionals. For example, some spirit craftsmen, blacksmiths, and other lifestyle class spirit chi professionals all needed this special flame. In fact, the Chef Supreme, one of the Radiance Federation's 5 Class 5 creation masters, was holding a special flame that was said to be a fusion of several kinds of Class 4 Abyss Dimensional Rifts. After these special flames fused with each other, they would form a brand new flame. The Chef Supreme used this flame to cook delicacies that could help fays improve their quality and quickly evolve. At the same time, it could also restore the fays' damaged roots. Lin Yuan noticed that many people were pointing at him and discussing something. He tilted his ear and listened carefully. How many times have we seen this silver-masked guy this week? If not 20, there are at least 10. Big brother, can you not use this week? Today is only Tuesday. Can't you just say that there are at least 10 on Monday? This silver-masked kid isn't professional enough. He isn't even wearing black clothes. This is the most unprofessional person I have seen. However, the silver mask on his face is much more exquisite than others. Lin Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm the worst person to pretend to be myself? With that thought in mind, Lin Yuan suddenly froze for a moment. Why did I use the word pretend? I am already one. Lin Yuan didn't choose a team like the previous time when he went to the endless forest for the wild harvest. This time, after Lin Yuan verified his identity, he entered the Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift's entrance and entered the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. After entering the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, Lin Yuan realized that the inside of the Dimensional Rift was much more prosperous than the outside. The entrance was like a large camp that sold some of the necessities in the Abyss Dimensional Rift. In the Abyss Dimensional Rift, Lin Yuan could feel that the temperature here was at least 30 degrees Celsius higher than the outside world. The temperature outside the royal capital was 15 degrees Celsius, but the temperature in this Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift was close to 50 degrees Celsius and had a sulfuric smell. This scorching heat made Lin Yuan feel uncomfortable. However, Lin Yuan didn't care about this scorching heat at that moment. Instead, when no one was paying attention, an amber button-shaped crystal object that was less than the size of a bottle cap fell to the ground at Lin Yuan's cuff. This amber button-shaped crystal turned into a wisp of fine sand and drilled into the Abyss Dimensional Rift's purplish-black soil. The source-type source sand was only instinctive and didn't need Lin Yuan to consume spiritual power to control it. Therefore, Lin Yuan simply let the gold eye/fantasy eye source sand freely create sand in the soil under his feet in the direction he was heading. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly felt someone gently tugging at his sleeve. Lin Yuan turned around and realized it was a young girl who was a few years younger than Zhou Xian. The young girl's skin was a little red and had some small freckles. However, she had an infectious and innocent smile on her face. Her big round eyes were like juicy black grapes. At that moment, the little girl saw Lin Yuan looking at her, so she handed over the ice blue grass in her hand and said, "Lin Yuan, you're a little girl. Big brother, you like brother hay too, right? Little Zhou likes it too. Here's an ice mist grass for big brother. I hope big brother won't be bullied by those evil demons." Lin Yuan looked at the little girl who handed him the ice mist grass and squatted down to touch the little girl's raised ahog. "Zhou, why did you give big brother the ice mist grass?" Lin Yuan looked at the ahog on the little girl's head and could not help but think of Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian always had a ahog on her head that liked to stand up. When he saw that this little girl's skin had a trace of redness, Lin Yuan knew that this little girl must have been living in this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift for a long time. The redness of the skin was the result of staying in a hot environment for a long time. Phase like the ice mist grass were very common in the outside world, and the price was close to 100 Federation dollars. The ice mist herb was a very ordinary normal fey. All it could do was release some icy mist to lower the temperature of the surrounding environment. Upon hearing that, the little girl revealed a big smile and said, "That's right. Big brother Hay is little Zhou's idol, so little Zhou gave big brother an ice mist grass. Little Zhou only gave others a blade of grass." Lin Yuan was a little surprised. It turned out that this little girl called Little Zhou was his fan. However, Lin Yuan felt a little strange. "Little Zhou, why do you give the leaves of the ice mist grass to everyone who comes in?" Hearing that, Little Zhou said happily, "It was Mommy who asked Little Zhou to do this. Mommy said that those uncles, aunties, big brothers and big sisters who came to the Dimensional Rift would beat up those baddies, which would reduce the number of baddies. Only then can Mummy bring Little Zhou here to bring some delicious food to eldest uncle, eldest aunt, eldest brother and eldest sister. Only then can Little Zhou eat the granulated ice Mummy made every day," Mummy said. At this point, Lin Yuan saw the girl named Little Zhou pondering for a moment. Then Little Zhou seemed to have thought of something and her eyes lit up. Mommy said this is called gratitude. When Lin Yuan saw this girl called Little Zhou's innocent smile, the face behind the mask also revealed an extremely sunny smile. This girl called Little Zhou's words gently caressed Lin Yuan's heart. This simple sentence seemed to shine with a radiant light. Baidu, read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 261. Lin Yuan rubbed Little Zhou's head and was preparing to stand up. Just as Lin Yuan was about to stand up, he suddenly felt a prying gaze from the side. This gaze wasn't the gaze of an ordinary passerby. Instead, This gaze was concealing a faintly discernible probing and sizing him up. Lin Yuan followed the direction of the gaze and turned his head. He saw an inconspicuous middle-aged man that didn't have any presence in the crowd sizing him up. When Lin Yuan suddenly turned his head, the middle-aged man was startled. It was obvious that he didn't expect Lin Yuan to suddenly turn around. The middle-aged man instantly concealed the probing expression on his face and laughed heartily as he walked over. "Hey, young man, you are also acting as black, right? There are plenty of adventurers wearing silver masks that enter the Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift every day, but it seems like little Zhou is the closest to you." Lin Yuan's brows behind the mask creased without a trace. This inconspicuous middle-aged man might be speaking very naturally, but when Lin Yuan turned his head around, the middle-aged man's face suddenly changed into a probing expression, and Lin Yuan had personally witnessed it. In fact, if Lin Yuan wasn't wearing Genius's Tool Transformation silver mask, he wouldn't have noticed it. As Lin Yuan had been wearing Genius's Tool Transformation silver mask, even though Lin Yuan's eyes were constantly looking at little Zhou, his perception of the surroundings was still very strong. Within a 10-meter radius, including the blind spot at the back of Lin Yuan's head, Lin Yuan's perception was extremely sharp. Genius's Tool Transformation silver mask might not be able to see through those meticulously arranged assassinations by high-ranked spirit chi professionals. However, Lin Yuan could still sense the middle-aged man's probing gaze. Lin Yuan, who had lived 2 lifetimes, had an additional lifetime of experience, and he was able to understand the emotions represented by other people's gazes. The middle-aged man's probing gaze had a trace of anxiety. However, this anxiety didn't seem to be coming from Lin Yuan. On the contrary, it seemed like this middle-aged man was hiding a trace of anxiety, which was why he was spying on and sizing up Lin Yuan, who had just entered the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. In other words, the middle-aged man was probing him to see if he would become an uncertain factor that could affect the matter that the middle-aged man was worried about. The middle-aged man's appearance might not be eye-catching, but Lin Yuan was able to use Genius's precise memory to memorize the middle-aged man's aura and figure. Little Zhou looked at the middle-aged man who suddenly spoke and walked over. She waved her little hand and said, "Hello, big uncle." This unremarkable middle-aged man sized up Lin Yuan a few more times before waving his hand at little Early. He then stood at the side and sized up the other adventurers that had just entered the dimensional rift. After the unremarkable middle-aged man left, Xiao Zhao whispered to Lin Yuan, "Big brother, this big uncle has been here for more than 2 years, but this big uncle is so strange." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan asked softly, "Why does little Zhao feel that this eldest uncle is very strange? This eldest uncle doesn't have a stall here. Other big brothers, big sisters, big uncles, and big aunts that come to explore will come here to buy some things from their mothers before entering to fight the demons and baddies. However, this eldest uncle will only leave for 1 or 2 days and will spend most of his time here doing nothing." Speaking of this, little Zhao spoke with some concern. "Big brother, do you think this eldest uncle can't defeat the demons and will fight the baddies? If that is the case, will this eldest uncle starve?" When Lin Yuan heard this, his originally frowning brows furrowed even more. This middle-aged man was indeed strange. However, Lin Yuan didn't probe too much into this middle-aged man. At the entrance of the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the royal capital, be it outside or inside, there was a king-class expert dispatched by the Radiance Federation's officials to stand guard. Therefore no one dared to cause trouble here. If they did, they would be punished according to the severity of the situation. However, even if this Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift was controlled, it was only at the pinnacle of Class 2 and it was still very dangerous inside. Therefore, this order and stability was only maintained at the entrance of this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Once inside, life and death would depend on one's strength and opportunities. This Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift had been controlled here for 7 to 8 years. It was unknown how many lives this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift would devour every year. Of course, the death of these spirit chi professionals wasn't only due to the demons in this Abyss Dimensional Rift, but also the humans who were also spirit chi professionals. There were plenty of opportunities in this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, such as rare spiritual ingredients or even strange flames. Such opportunities were often accompanied by great value, so it wasn't strange for people to kill and snatch their treasures. After the Spirit Qi awakening, the human evolution process had changed from the original foundation. Before the Spirit Qi awakening, humans relied more on wisdom and not martial strength. However, after the Spirit Qi awakening, humans were like the many other creatures in the world. They needed to increase their individual strength to deal with the challenges of evolution. After the Spirit Qi awakening, there were also great benefits in the process of increasing human strength. One of the greatest benefits was the extension of lifespan. It was just like after becoming a king-class expert. Even at the age of 100, the body's cell vitality would still be comparable to that of a 20 or 30-year-old youth. Lin Yuan walked into the Abyss Dimensional Rift's depths from this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift's entrance. Along the way, Lin Yuan didn't summon Chimey or Red Thorn. Lin Yuan's main objective for this training was to practice how to use the Source-type Source Sand in combat. Ever since Lin Yuan had obtained the Source Sand, he had never used it in combat. Therefore, in this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, Lin Yuan had to properly practice using the Source Sand's combat ability. Although the Source Sand's exclusive skill, Sand Control, allowed Lin Yuan to use the Source Sand as his own arm, being able to control the Source Sand as his own arm and controlling it with the greatest efficiency in combat were two different things. Controlling the Source Sand as his own arm was a kind of ability, but controlling it with the greatest efficiency was a kind of experience. Not long after entering this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, Lin Yuan saw a group of Class 2 demons. Baidu was the first to read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 262. This group of Class 2 demons was a group of horn demons. Horn demons were considered the most notorious existences among the Class 2-dimensional life forms in the Abyss Dimensional Rift. Each horn demon had a huge horn on its head. This horn was spiral-shaped and had a strange flame pattern on its tip. Each horn demon was the size of a bull, and its thick and strong limbs allowed the horn demons to carry shocking power when they charged. When the horn demons charged forward, the flame pattern would emit sparks with the withering characteristic after hitting the target. At the same time, the horn demons could also spit out flames with the withering characteristic. Horn demons had great strength. Although Class 2 horn demons were only equivalent to silver phase, Class 2-dimensional life forms were comparable to gold phase. However, the Class 2-dimensional life forms horn demons were comparable to some gold phase in terms of strength. Furthermore, horn demons could spit out flames with the withering characteristic. This powerful strength and flames with withering characteristics made the horn demon's single combat strength almost the top of the Class 2-dimensional creatures. This was the benefit of a Class 2-dimensional life form like horn demons with a complex genetic model. However, such a complex genetic model wasn't so friendly to Lu Jie's Source-type Insect Queen and Lin Yuan's Source-type Source Sand. If Lu Jie's Insect Queen devoured an insect species Fey with a complex genetic model like the Abyss Dimensional life form, the horn demon's genetic model, the amount of spiritual power required to replicate such an insect species Fey with a complex genetic model was far more than replicating other insect species Feys with relatively simple genetic models. Just like Lin Yuan's gold/fantasy breed Source-type Source Sand, the Gravel Spirit Acceptance could accept a heart-penetrating iron line that was equivalent to Platinum 3/Flawless. However, if the Gravel Spirit Acceptance was a horn demon, it could only accept a horn demon that was equivalent to a Pinnacle Gold/Flawless Fey. A Pinnacle Gold/Flawless Fey might have extremely strong combat power among Pinnacle Gold/Flawless Feys. However, it was completely powerless against the heart-penetrating iron line that was equivalent to a Platinum 3/Flawless Fey. The diversity of horn demons' attacks allowed them to become a dimensional life form that cultivated elemental magic and physical strength. However, the heart-penetrating iron line's attack method was very simple. It relied on the explosive power and penetrative ability of its slender and hard body to assassinate the target. However, Lin Yuan had to admit that when he looked at the aura of this group of horn demons, which wasn't considered a lot, he felt that it was even more oppressive than a small sea of insects. This small group of horn demons had obviously discovered Lin Yuan. After seeing Lin Yuan, this group of bull-sized horn demons let out a strange but abnormally loud roar and cruelly charged at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan looked at the 40 to 50 horned demons that were charging at him and extended his hand unhurriedly. The moment Lin Yuan raised his hand, the ground beneath the horned demons collapsed, and the originally hard purplish-black soil started to boil like quicksand. The boiling sand directly stopped the centaur's charge. The centaur desperately tried to break free from the surging quicksand. But at that moment Lin Yuan's raised hand clenched into a fist. The instant Lin Yuan's hand clenched into a fist, the 40 to 50 horned demons suddenly let out intense and painful cries. Subsequently, these horned demons stopped trying to break free from the surging quicksand. Behind each horned demon, there was a broad and thick sword made of bluish-black ferromanganese. The 40 or so horned demons that were the size of bulls were tied to the thick sword by the ferromanganese chains that were separated from the source sand. Due to the source sand's exclusive skill metal-consume manifestation, the surging quicksand was able to form a chain sword made of ferromanganese from the gravel. The surface of the ferromanganese was complemented by the abnormally sharp metal characteristics. As the horned demons struggled violently, they immediately cut open large wounds on their bodies. As the horned demons struggled again, the wounds quickly turned into holes due to the repeated cuts. A large amount of purplish-red blood, which was unique to abyssal demons, flowed out of the holes, and the blood immediately vanished when it flowed into the quicksand. Lin Yuan shook his head. These horned demons weren't enough for him to train. Immediately after, Lin Yuan's mind moved, and the chain sword instantly tightened. In just a moment, these bull-sized horned demons stopped breathing. Lin Yuan waved his hand and stored all these horned demons into his leaf-shaped face storage box. Mosquitoes might be small, but they were still meat. These Class 2 abyss-dimensional lifeforms, the horned demons, were very suitable as food for the Bronze 6/Epic Red Thorn. Now Red Thorn was no longer consuming large quantities of alien insect-dimensional lifeforms' flesh. Instead, it was consuming large quantities of abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh. The abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh also contained extremely strong acidity. However, this acidity was different from the alien insect-dimensional lifeforms' blood. The acid in the flesh of the alien insect-dimensional creatures was extremely corrosive. However, the abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh's acidity was like sulfur. Apart from being corrosive, it also had a burning and withering characteristic. Initially, when Red Thorn was at the elite grade, consuming abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh would be a burden on the mouth of relinquished digestion. However, now that Red Thorn's strength had increased, it wasn't so restrained when eating abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh. At the same time, the abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh's acidity with the burning and withering characteristic could make the acid in Red Thorn's digestive fluid more diverse. In fact, while Red Thorn was consuming abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh to increase its acidity, after devouring abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh, Red Thorn was no longer that afraid of the withering characteristic in abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flames. As a source-type lifeform that evolved by devouring flesh, Red Thorn had also grasped a portion of this withering characteristic in fire resistance. Of course, only Red Thorn's Ortet possessed such fire resistance. As for the ramets and child ramets that Red Thorn produced, their fire resistance was still very weak. However, Lin Yuan believed that as long as Red Thorn devoured abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh in the future, Red Thorn had already grasped a trace of the abyssal dimensional lifeform's blood's withering characteristic, and its fire resistance would continue to increase. At the same time, Red Thorn's ability to devour abyss-dimensional lifeforms' flesh would likely be passed on to the ramets and child ramets through the spores ejected from the spore cavity. Baidu read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. Chapter 263. The sky in the abyss-dimensional rift was always dark red, and there was no distinction between day and night. It was very easy to lose track of time while training in the abyss-dimensional rift. Only when one was extremely fatigued would they remember that a long time had passed and that they needed to rest. The ground was also a boundless purplish-black color. There were rugged rock ravines and smooth areas that seemed to be formed by flowing lava. The air was filled with a dense smell of sulfur, and the temperature was maintained at nearly 50 degrees Celsius. It required constant hydration. Time flew by, and Lin Yuan had already been training in the abyss-dimensional rift for a month. Lin Yuan was already used to the Abyss Dimensional Rifts file environment. A level 4 horned pseudomorphing demon was struggling fiercely in the midst of the boiling quicksand. The struggling horned terror demon was spitting out sticky liquid-like flames that could almost be considered brown flames. The Class 4 horned terror demon had the strength of a platinum fae. The sticky liquid-like brown flames that the horned terror demon spat out had an extremely strong withering characteristic. Even a platinum plant-type phase roots would be immediately damaged after coming into contact with a little bit of the flames, and the area that came into contact with the flames would wither. If the flames were to come into contact with too many of them, the platinum phase vitality would be corroded by the flames with the extremely strong withering characteristic, causing it to die. All of a sudden, the horned terror demon, which was struggling violently in the surging quicksand sea, suddenly stopped showing signs of life. It was as though something in the sea of sand had struck it and killed it in a single strike. The Class 4 horned terror demon was an evolved form of the Class 2 horned demon. Due to the complexity of the Class 2 horned demon's genetic model, its evolution potential was extremely high. In fact, some extremely talented Class 2 horned demons could even evolve into Class 5 burning horned demons after evolving into Class 4 horned terror demons. A Class 5 burning horned demon's combat strength was equivalent to a diamond fae. It was already considered the pinnacle of combat strength in the uncontrolled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. This Class 4 horned pseudomorphing demon, which was equivalent to a platinum fae, was still unable to block the all-out sneak attack of the heart-penetrating iron line, which was equivalent to a platinum 3/flawless fae. Lin Yuan let out a breath of relief. For the past month, Lin Yuan had been training in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. After this month of blood and fire, Lin Yuan had a clearer understanding of his strength. At the same time, he could now achieve true compatibility with the source sand. With such compatibility, Lin Yuan could command the source sand to attack, defend, or control with the greatest effect based on his thoughts. It was just like when he had commanded Chimey and Red Thorn to fight. For over a month, Lin Yuan had been letting the source sand rely on its instincts to create sand in the purplish-black soil. Even Lin Yuan did not know how many grains of sand the Gold Eye/Fantasy Eye source sand had created in the ground under his feet without stopping for a month. Although the source sand's strength had already reached Gold Eye/Fantasy Eye. However, as an elemental source-type life form, the source sand's intelligence was not high even if it was a Gold/Fantasy breed. The source sand, which had advanced to a fantasy breed, could only transmit simple and vague thoughts. However, as the source sand's gravel underground spread out in a large area, the source sand's gravel spread out. Through its control of the gravel and its perception of spiritual power, the source sand had already discovered many fire-type spiritual ingredients. As long as the source sand sensed these spiritual ingredients, the large amount of gravel hidden under the purplish-black soil would surge out under the source sand's control. It would wrap the spiritual ingredients in the sand and bring them underground. Finally, according to the source sand's will, it would transport them to Lin Yuan's feet. For the past month, apart from training his strength, Lin Yuan had also obtained quite a lot of fire-type spiritual ingredients. The harvest of fire-type spiritual ingredients in this Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift was also quite plentiful. After the source sand's gravel was spread out under the ground, its ability to search for treasures was really not just for show. Of course, during this month, Lin Yuan had also understood some truths that he had never truly understood even in his 2 lives. That was the principle of human heart upward and human nature downward. Humans were divided into good and evil, and so was human nature. Humans always wanted to be able to become better, so the human heart was never satisfied. Therefore, the human heart never had a limit. As for human nature downward, it meant that when humans wanted to achieve a certain goal, in order to satisfy the greed in their hearts, they would unconditionally lower their human nature's bottom line. Therefore, human nature never had a bottom line. In this Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, apart from the Abyss Dimensional Lifeforms attacks, Lin Yuan had also encountered 3 waves of attacks from Spirit Chi professionals. The reason Lin Yuan had been attacked by these 3 waves of Spirit Chi professionals was that he did not have any experience training in the wilderness. Lin Yuan had been attacked by these 3 waves of Spirit Chi professionals because he had not had any experience training in the wilderness. When Lin Yuan had taken out food from his amber button-shaped diamond face storage box, he had been seen by the other spirit chi professionals. These 3 waves of spirit chi professionals had wanted to kill him, allowing Lin Yuan to truly understand the dangers of training in the dimensional rift. Lin Yuan did not have the slightest bit of mercy toward these spirit chi professionals who wanted to kill him. Those who wanted to kill would always be killed. Ever since Lin Yuan had been ambushed by Qin Zhao and Qin Rui in the royal capital's outskirts, he had already made a decision in his heart. Lin Yuan was still the same person he had been in the past. His heart was like a flower that grew toward the sun. However, against those who wanted to kill him, Lin Yuan would also use the most cruel methods. His life was his and no one could take it away. If they wanted to take it, they would die. These spirit chi professionals who wanted to kill him for his treasures were all buried in this endless underground gravel. Lin Yuan knew that these spirit chi professionals who were exploring the dimensional rift wanted to kill him because they were after his wealth. Therefore, after these spirit chi professionals were devoured by the source sand, their wealth naturally went to Lin Yuan's hands. As for the wealth in the hands of these spirit chi professionals who wanted to kill him, Lin Yuan really did not care about it. These miscellaneous spiritual materials and those radiance dollars added up to just over 100,000 were just a drop in the bucket for Lin Yuan now. Lin Yuan would not keep these resources. He planned to take them to Zhou Xian's Star Web store after the training and let her help him sell them. Lin Yuan was now a major shareholder of Zhou Xian's Star Web store, and Lin Yuan's Star Web store's profits were even more than Zhou Xian's. During this period of time, Lin Yuan's purchase with no loss store's profits were already not a small sum. However, if Chimey saw Lin Yuan's purchase with no loss store's wealth and then looked at its live streaming room's profits, it would definitely say that none of them could fight. At first, Lin Yuan had an exceptionally uncomfortable feeling in his heart during his first massacre. However, this uncomfortable feeling slowly dissipated after Lin Yuan digested it on his own. Lin Yuan looked at the purplish-red sky in the Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift and said softly, "If one wishes to shake the world, one must create waves on the flat ground." Since Lin Yuan had already decided to establish his private faction. In the process of his private faction's rise, it was inevitable that it would be accompanied by killings. The rise of a faction would never be peaceful. However, Lin Yuan also had his own ideas about the development of his private faction. Lin Yuan had always known where his advantages were. His advantages were the high concentration of inexhaustible spirit chi in the spirit lock spatial zone and his ability to enhance phase. Therefore, Lin Yuan's private faction planned to first collect resources and accumulate wealth. Lin Yuan did not want to establish a private faction with a large number of people. Instead, he wanted to build an organization where everyone in the organization was made up of absolute elites. In his previous life, Lin Yuan had also seen a lot of anime when he was young. It was like the Akatsuki organization in Naruto. The 10 Blades in the Realm. Such a faction was what Lin Yuan wanted to build. Lin Yuan's private faction was built on the floating island whale's back. The floating island whale was hidden in the clouds all day long, just like the flowing clouds in the sky. The flowing clouds in the sky had always been out of this world and rarely had an impact on the mortal world. It was unlike a faction that was like a thunderstorm with a great momentum. Once it rained, the world would know. However, no matter how powerful the thunderstorm was, it was ultimately only a moment of heroism. However, if anything dared to anger the flowing clouds hidden in the sky, the clouds would surge and the sky would change. At that moment, Lin Yuan's brows suddenly raised. According to the source-type Source Sand's perception when it was exploring the spiritual ingredients underground, it seemed to have sensed an object that contained a huge amount of spirit chi. Moreover, this object seemed to be a plant. Based on the Source Sand's perception, Lin Yuan knew that this object had extremely long roots underground. After sensing the Source Sand's perception again and again, Lin Yuan finally confirmed that this plant that contained a huge amount of spirit chi was very small. It was so small that it might not even be as big as Lin Yuan's tightly clenched fist. Therefore, Lin Yuan gave the Source Sand in order to try and bring this plant that contained a huge amount of spirit chi over. The Source Sand sensed Lin Yuan's will and immediately started to move according to Lin Yuan's order. At that moment, Lin Yuan could sense that the Source Sand was facing an abnormally firm obstruction. Lin Yuan immediately injected spiritual power into the Source Sand and let it use its exclusive skill Metal Consume Manifestation. It precipitated the day and night spirit silver in the sea of sand to form feathers and started to chisel and dig at this firm obstruction. Just as the source sand broke through the obstruction, a green flame suddenly burst into the sky in the distance. This green flame burst into the sky with a shocking momentum. It immediately dyed the purplish-red sky of the controlled class three-dimensional rift with a layer of green. Read the latest chapter of Beast Evolution Merchant Claw Book House for free. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.